Hello. You are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I am Daragh, this here is Shane.
Hello.
Two brothers talking all things rugby from the point of view of Leinster and Ireland. Now this is episode number 119. We have done 119 of these things, so bear that in mind. Now it's going to be, before you criticise, I mean we're burnt out. Yep. We're burnt out. We're past it. But no, it's going to be a great show. This one, with nice and short. Actually, well, by our standards, it's going to be a little shorter, because we don't have anything to preview this week. The Six Nations is going on its second and last gap week this week. And likewise the Rugby Europe Championship. So we're just going to look back on what was a very talking point heavy weekend, particularly in the Six Nations, but obviously in Rugby Europe as well. I mean, there's not a lot of off-field stuff taking over some of the conversations going on, or refereeing stuff, or non-rugby stuff as we consider it. But the Six Nations did have an incredible opening to the weekend between Scotland and France. Brilliant performance by Les Bleus, on track for the Grand Slam. We're going to dig into that game momentarily, but we're also going to, after that, turn our attention to the big clash between Wales and England, the controversies therein, the tight game that it was, talk through how that played out, and then obviously that unfortunate kind of farce of a game between Ireland and Italy on Sunday that played out like a no intensity World Cup warm-up game.
Damn scrim at the end of it for sure. But as you say, we will also turn our attention to Rugby Europe and take a look at the two games that took place there this weekend. It had been 3, but obviously Russia no longer able to participate. But we did have Portugal pumping the Netherlands, which we kind of saw coming, and we also had a bit of a humdinger and a great performance from the Spanish as well to see off Romania. So we will dig into those games.
A shocker and an amazing game. What an amazing performance from Spain in front of their home fans in Madrid. That was one of the highlights of the weekend. It was extraordinary stuff. It's thrown all the World Cup permutations back into flux, and we'll dig into all of them as well. Obviously with this Russian news as well, we'll look at what that means as well for the Tier 2 teams trying to qualify for the World Cup. All of that stuff coming up later in the show. We're also going to look back on the women's qualifier that Scotland blew away Colombia in that game, indeed. Unfortunately, despite our hopes based on their tries against Kazakhstan that maybe they'd do something, but Scotland were way too strong and qualified for their first World Cup since 2010, so good for them. Congratulations to the Scots. And then we're also going to talk about the under-20 Six Nations, which persisted as well.
Then we're going to pivot on to club rugby as well. Starting in Europe, we'll give roundups of top tours of the URC and the Premiership. And then we'll look further afield. We'll look at the MLR stateside, the Japan League 1 as well, which is going on, and then Super Rugby Pasifika as well, which kicked off last week and has got through its second round as well. So we'll look back on those fixtures and look ahead to what's to come, and then we'll round up the show with the news of the week as well.
Absolutely. And remember, if you do enjoy this content that we're putting out here, if you do enjoy the show at all, if you think any bits of it are worth listening to, be sure to share it on with your friends. Do like the videos, that helps a lot. And any thoughts that you have, any ways we can improve, any thoughts on the rugby, I know there's been lots of opinions floating around based on last week's rugby. Be sure to let us know yours. It's always illuminating and interesting to read your guys' take on the rugby as well.
Absolutely. So with no more ado, I think we will pivot on and start the show. And as you say, we're going to start nowhere else but the Six Nations, which is the big show and was the big story. And another great round of action as well. Just some really, as you say, kind of curiosities kind of taking over the talking points as well, despite some top level footy going on. Just on the macro scale, you have Scotland and Wales becoming the first sides to go 1 and 2, so a losing record instead,
and
probably OUT
Wales
out.
Title defence gone. Scotland's desperate hope for a trophy under Gregor Townsend, and with this generation of very talented players, another season goes by, no silverware. So that was two big stories from the weekend. Despite all of the controversies around the refereeing and the decisions in the Ireland game, etc., the fact that those two great sides, maybe good sides, not great sides quite.
Maybe that's the distinction with differences.
Two very good sides bowed out of the competition, and that definitely does add some colour and flavour to proceedings. Kind of and then there were 3.
It kind of does and then there were 3. Ireland and England obviously both 2-1 with winning records and still within reach, but France looking very, very good and odds on for that Grand Slam. Obviously one more away challenge to come in a couple of weeks in Cardiff, and then England at home on the final weekend, but they are looking very good and they're worthy of their place atop the table right now, because it was another impressive showing from them.
Absolutely, and that is where we'll start. The Saturday afternoon game that was It finished Scotland 17, France 36. And man, oh man, this was the best of the three games this weekend, I think. England and Wales was its own dynamic and was very engaging by the end. But this game was played at a blistering speed.
It had the grandstand finish that this game definitely didn't have.
Well, indeed. It was probably the finish that this game deserved, because the way it started, there was just this electric atmosphere in Murrayfield. There were loads of French travelling fans. True. And they were getting the noise up, and then the Scottish fans were responding with their own noise, of course. And it was just this raucous kind of very, very Six Nations atmosphere. It was the most Six Nations, I think, of any game that we've had since the pandemic. It was it really did feel, you've got the feel of that, like that almost undescribable, unmatched atmosphere in our game. The Six Nations atmospheres, they're just incredible. And this game had it all. And in that first half, what was playing out was just this brilliant game that could have been perhaps in Edinburgh, France, starting the game at a blistering speed, the Scots then coming back, and then it's all up for grabs. They nearly get that try on half time, then France go up the other end and score, and unfortunately in the second half Scotland do fall away, and they mismanage the game really entirely, and panic in many areas and end up getting blown away, and it was a shame only in that, as impressive as the French were, by 60 minutes the crowd, all of that atmosphere was gone. There was the Marseillaise.
The Marseillaise was 63 minutes, I think, that was reverberating around. That's not great from the Scottish point of view.
But Murrayfield did get very quiet from the Scottish fans, and then that was kind of a sorry sight, and definitely felt like the atmosphere just got unplugged by some spectacular French play.
By some of that as well, for sure. Even from it opened with a bit of a curiosity. I think my remark at the time, because I think France kicked the first ball out on the full, and that engaged a Scottish scrum that then became a quick charge down, and then another scrum, and then another scrum, and before you know it, like 3 minutes of game time had elapsed, and we'd only had scrums. And I was just remembering back to Paris a couple of weeks before, going like, where was this France? Why didn't we play this France? But that France did show up, the quick starting one. It was just a stop-start kind of beginning, but boy, they kind of hit the ground running very quickly, and through like talismanic leaders like Dupont, who just, he's kind of just shrugging off Scots for fun and kind of undoing a lot of really good tactical stuff that Scotland were trying to do, the kicking game that they were trying to expose them with.
Exactly. It worked out. Like, there was definitely a little foreshadowing in the early part of the game when Chamonix missed a sitter of a penalty to start the game. And it was off. Daragh got a great steal, and what a performance from him. We'll touch on that. He had so many plays in this game.
He did.
But he opened the game with a great steal, taken to test rugby like a duck to water, and the Scots tried to run out, and then Marchand got in over the ball, and McAnally tried to clean him, missed. Gilchrist tried to clean him, missed. And that was in many ways a synopsis of the game. Marchand winning out over his opposite number and one of those big Scottish locks. That was really the tight five, is where the biggest difference was in the game.
True.
But they missed the kick, and what ensues is this kicking battle, and this was something that we talked about as being so important in the game. And the Scots are very clever, and they had the wind behind them, and so France had their back three sitting way deep. And Finn decides that the option is to kind of peg a shallow, low kind of dribbler and send Darcy Graham after it.
It might have worked.
But what he didn't perhaps factor in was that he was kicking it in the direction of one little Antoine Dupont. And I mean, you could mention his name in 1,000 ways in this game, but it just on this
set the tone.
On this play alone, it was the way he just changed the game. This was going to be a tight tactical kicking matchup until he goes and beats one man. Darcy Graham slips past Tui Pilato, and on the outside of, I think it was McAnally.
It might have been Daragh as well.
Or Daragh,
gets outside Daragh, and then Daragh is the one who actually ends up making the tackle, but only after he sits down Ali Price.
He just keeps going, dances down the left touchline, and then of course Fiku, the other genius in this French team, comes in to play 9, pops it to Cyril by on a short line. The Scots are scrambling, and then they pop it off, and Marchand sits down Xander and then just pops it off to Willemsen. It's just this explosive
finish to a very explosive kind of counter attack and transition, and just
changes the kicking game already.
When you can attack like that off kick return, it's just something magical. And you saw even in that England game, they had all kinds of opportunity to run stuff back from kick return and didn't get anywhere near as much purchase as that particular one from Dupont. It was just something stellar, and it kind of shocked the Scots and took a very early lead, as they've been wont to do with this French side. They're starting very, very quickly, and even that their quick start didn't even end there, because I think there was a 50-22 off Was it off that very restart, or was that a 3-pointer subsequent to it? That
no, the Scots got 3 on the board, but it wasn't a 3-pointer that aged particularly well. Actually, they did manage to pull off. Darcy Graham took a catch like Mac Hansen, although it was down the centre of the field. That was a brilliant play off the restart, and a bit like being blown by the French, but then catching them with their pants down off the restart. There was a bit of deja vu there, although it did only yield 3 points. They got a penalty advantage for an offside, but then guess who? Gael Ficou, who won that matchup thoroughly between himself and Russell, shut down that play, reading where Russell was going to give it, and then the free play was gone. They kicked the 3. That 3 doesn't age well because it's off that restart.
That's the
that
one
they
where
kick it back to
50-22.
I tell you what, it's a real error, and it's a brilliant kick from Chamonix. It was a sign that Scotland are already knowing France are not showing up in Murrayfield mode. This is the real France, hungry for a slam, and it's going to be a real challenge. They're pulling out class plays, but it's just off the backfield with the law the way it is. When you're box kicking from inside your 22 and you're not going for touch, you can't send the far winger up unless you have the fullback covering, and Hogg was covering very much the left from where it was kicked to the left side of the field. There was no one covering the right side of the field, so Chamonix just looks up and executes a perfect kick. But that's a bit of an error from the Scots.
It is. It did look to my eye now that it was Darcy Graham who probably bought up a little bit into the line where he didn't quite need to, and that was what it was exposed. But it only takes a moment, and it was really well executed. And unlike most 50-22s, they didn't botch the line out. In fact, they scored off it. It was a really good sequence from France then off that to just seize them. And they look so good in the first quarter of this tournament. Really, they do. They just look sharp as anything and really attuned to where the ball should go, and taking scores for fun.
It's working defenses using their skill but doing it in such a smart way, and this is what Ficou gives them. But it was that shape on the on just a classic screen shape, and Ficou has the ball. He's got a man in front of him who's obviously marking him, so he can't truck it. But he has a short runner in Dante and then an out the back runner in Entamac. And Chris Harris, Mr. Super Defender, is ready to hit either, like he so often is. So he's like, actually, you go short, I got Dante. You go out the back, I got Entamac. I got them both. What are you going to do, Ficou? And so Ficou slips it to Dante, and then he bites it on Dante, and it's just the skill.
Quick
like hands. He just, out of nowhere, like faster than the camera can catch it between that set of hands. Takes the short option, but then gives it back to Entamac, opens up the space. Harris buys in entirely, and then it's open season. And the Scottish Scramble D does really well to get across to Pinot, but then the offloads inside to Buy, and then
just
into
a couple of really good offloads in that one. It was a beautiful sequence of very, very French rugby. That was just a great start to the game. And then 12-3 after 13 minutes, and you're going, holy God, France are here to play. But in Scotland's defence, what followed was kind of their first offensive spell of the game, and then kind of they worked their way back into it as well. Their first one didn't quite go to plan in terms of their offensive set. They were repelled. France's defence was mighty throughout, and that was going to be true regardless of how they played it out.
Probably one of the themes of the game. And actually, if you look back, obviously in the second half, France are so hungry and they bring on their substitutes, and they really have the measure of Scotland at that stage. But in this early stage, some of those little probing offensive sets, I felt like they just weren't giving that extra pass that they needed to be given. And actually it was Sione Tuipulotu who in a couple of positions
was in position to pass. And
he was, and it was off right and left, but he was put in that back position, the trail runner behind the screen, takes the ball and then just doesn't give it. He trucks it up twice, and that just that annoys me. I really think you need, when you're playing a blitz defence that gets on the inside and you're finding it so tough to get outside them, when you have opportunities, you have to be brave with the ball. And while Russell they need more guys in the midfield who can complete passes. And
this is where Johnson's absence has probably felt a little bit.
He was never like a second distributor type of centre, but I do feel like the rise of Tuipulotu was found out a little bit in this game. He wasn't ready for it. He doesn't quite have the offensive instincts to deal with a defence like that, and he made some mistakes. He ran into traffic, and on a couple of occasions in Scotland were repelled in those crucial opening sets that they had.
Breakdowns were so messy and so slow that any contact like that was going to disrupt it. And credit to the likes of Daragh for getting stuck into it. But then the other thing that was pulsating was the set piece battle, because early doors, Schumann managed to grab a scrum penalty against Antonio, which was the very, first very impressive
moment from Antonio in the tournament. Schumann's
just awesome. But the French, credit to them as well, just on a tactical point. In the first, I think it was 24 minutes, they'd already got 2 penalties from the the line out for Scotland kind of coming in and joining them all while the man was still in the air. And France were holding Woki particularly up there for just a little bit long to wait for that contact.
Let's see if they do something silly.
It was obviously something they'd done in the homework. Now, they did get warned after that particular second one not to leave him up there, but it had already yielded all the return you'd want from something like that. Just a little tactical little point that you'll make pre-match. So let's see if this will work. And it worked twice for them and yielded a couple of crucial pens.
And to be fair to the Scots, I mean, pretty much the opening 30 minutes it was kind of going against them. They obviously shipped those two great early scores. The game had settled down, and it had settled down into a game that France were squeezing them in.
Sure.
But they did show some quality and some class
to
come back into it. It was off a box kick, their own kicking game. Jaminet missed it, and then Duhan
dropped it cold, didn't he?
He did a little. He kind of misread it, and he didn't so much drop it as just not reach for a spot where it wasn't. The ball sat up, and Duhan proved, as he did a couple of occasions in this game, why when he gets the ball in broken field,
so
there are a few more electric. They really are. He breaks away, charges up the field, and then they do have a great offensive set in the build up to that try, where they keep a bit of pace on the ball. They consistently, on a couple of occasions, Russell picks the right man outside of the blitz. Bradbury on one occasion he hits perfectly, sits a little deeper, doesn't take it to the line at all, just catches it, looks up and then finds the pass, trusts that other guys are going to be running off him and doesn't need to run anymore much because the defence is coming up. And then he gets the ball in the pivot position and tries to throw a skip pass outside, which Jaminet from fullback thinks he has the read on and comes in and gives away a... Like, was that a borderline card?
It was borderline card. Well, it was met with howls of derision from the Murrayfield faithful, and actually no more so than it was gasps because it was play on was called initially, and Pinot very nearly kind of kicked it on and scampered all the way away himself, but it was dragged back, and it was a penalty. He wasn't going for the ball. He was in a position to go for the ball, but then he tucked his head to get out of the way of the head contact, and that means you're not making an attempt to get the ball.
And he did kind of just come careening through, and he successfully shut down the play, but the Scots got the pen, kicked the corner, and then did a good red zone drive. It was a little slow.
It was slow because Price got held up at one point, and then they had to go again, but then they yielded a couple of penalty advantages, and they were under penalty advantage when they managed to find Daragh, who else, but their man of the match.
He cut a very nice line, and Price did manage that period of the game really well, and they got back into the game, and that was when Murrayfield was at its most swell.
12-10, 30 odd minutes on the clock, and it's very much game on at that
momentum
point.
on,
because that particular period France were kind of reeling, and they were getting towards half time and they were struggling, and there was another, Russell was starting to probe really well at that point and finding some nice passes, and he very nearly found Hogg on one side, and then they went down the other side and nearly got Duhan into space, but Haining's pass was a little off, and then Duhan couldn't gather it.
It had to be perfect because the French defence was going so well, and that whole sequence leading up to half time was categorised by that. Like, there was one off a scrum where Russell ran right and Fiku went off to his outside man, so he took it on and nearly busted the line. I think Entmac just got him, but it was a bit of a line break, and he presents it and Price picks it up, and guess who's timed the rush perfectly is Dupont. Comes straight into his face, grabs him, drags him back. The set kind of gone, and that was when they flicked it back over, and Haining couldn't make a play, but they were, the pressure that they were putting on was brilliant. And then that was this huge moment just before the half started with exactly that. It was Dupont came flying in on Hogg in the backfield, got him, and Hogg this time gets a desperation pass away to Russell, and guess who? Fiku comes flying up in Russell's face, but Russell, to his credit, slips the ball away from Fiku as well, and they get it to Duhan, and then
siding through.
It was later.
Lovely bit of waffle, kind of little interplay from when he got through there, and it found its way
switch with Harris.
Found its way into Harris's hands, and then from there it was panic mode. Literally, what was it? It was 38 minutes, I think, when that was happening, and that is nearly the halfway point of Scotland's tournament campaign. Just about half time in the middle game, and it was. It was
as if something washed over
eerily familiar picture, because they've had drops like that, cold drops of 7 points. They've had it in Dublin. I've been in attendance when they've done it. The same personnel. I've seen Hogg do it, and it's not necessarily the fact that the skill was poorly executed. The pass was overthrown, probably should have been gathered anyway, shouldn't have been thrown in the first place because there was only one French defender, and there was his halfback left of him, another man there, and then Hogg.
I think it's Harris more than Hogg. I mean, I think Hogg is he's at full tilt and he's reaching out to his left to try and gather it. It's a really tough catch, and it's certainly tough to catch with the momentum
to execute, especially when it's the wrong decision.
It was probably the worst straighten and give I've ever seen, because he cuts that switch line and then he straightens it and gives it instantly, which looks nice for for the cameras, but actually on that occasion was just so not the right thing to do. He had Ntamack drifting off him, and what he needed to do was kind of charge at Ntamack and make sure that Ntamack squared his shoulders and tried to tackle him. And then when he did that, he could have just dumped it off to Price on his left. And if Aldred is making it across, Price can just find Hogg. Easy try, mature play. And no, he just instantly, no sooner was he in the space than he'd thrown the skip pass towards Hogg. It wasn't on the money, and Hogg dropped it. And then, shudders and murmurs around Murrayfield and all of that, and it's 7 points on the floor and you're still behind, and it's a great time to score and it's an equally bad time to botch one, but that doesn't pardon the panic that follows, because like France were still gassed at that point and Scotland were still on top. It was still sustained pressure. The result of that was still a France scrum in their red zone or close to, and it was like there was only a minute or so left in the half. France would have been grateful to get in at half time 12-10 up, given the way the last 10 minutes had gone. And yet, from the scrum, it went down. It was a penalty. France get a penalty. Against Schumann on
this occasion. They kick down. They win the line out. And then through another sequence, another penalty for
taking out the lifter.
And the same thing that you're doing over and over again, marching them down the field. They kick to pretty much the 22 then, and then it's 40 plus minutes.
Then all of a sudden it's a goal line stand, which they can't deal with because the France execute it really well. And then France do dial into champion mode.
They do, championship minutes. They would have been grateful to get off if they were still under the pump the way they were, but they were just, the pressure valve was so relieved by just kind of collectively Scotland getting into that mindset that's so bamboozling and I'm sure very frustrating for the Scots to look at, because it's just, there's no need for them to panic the way they do, and yet they do collectively. And it's not like the crime of Harris not choosing the right option in that moment is a bad one. Obviously it's a chance blown, but it doesn't fully explain just why the response to that moment is collective.
It was
panic.
Our exact critique of them last year when they looked so good but lost that game against Wales, and it was these moments either side of half time, their capacity to be the anti-All Blacks, the way the All Blacks dial it in. Scotland dial in their worst errors of the game in those crucial moments, and it's now consistent. And in this game, it really did kill them from a tight game to a blowout
in a matter of like 3 minutes of game time, because it was 42 minutes on the clock when Fiku managed to finish that try, and he took that very well.
What an effort from him.
Oh, it was great.
I love that he catches it in the midfield.
Yeah, initially it looks like he's running lateral, which would be like if Gary Ringrose was doing it and very annoyed, like straighten guys, but then he actually read it perfectly because he knew he had the gas to get outside the last covering legitimate defender and isolate Ali Price out there on his own on the wing and just do him one-on-one, which is what he did.
He's such a savage player, Gael Fiku. He's in some form as well, but he's between his athleticism and his capacity to read the game, he's starting to rival Lecanio Am, so he is as a midfield genius. I think that's your number one midfield in the world anyway, but but he's playing some phenomenal stuff. Is Gael Fiku, and they take that try. Then to start the second half, obviously a bizarre try that kills the game, and it's Ali Price really just unnecessarily trying to buy a penalty off Wokey, gets himself into trouble. And it's France's unsung hero, Francois Cross, who makes all kinds of hidden plays. He's one of these like mystery men who hides. The commentators never notice that it's him making the play. It always seems to pass people by. He had another couple of steals in this game, but he does it like on the far side of the camera. He's just like a man in disguise making all kinds of plays, and he gets up, causes Ali Price to spill the ball when he's trying to do his milk a penalty thing. And they do get a break here, France, because Wokey catches the broken ball from his offside position that they're trying to buy from the ground, and it's bizarre that the ref doesn't pick up on that. And so he just pops it up, and then Fiku...
I see that all the time. You're not allowed to play the ball on the ground, and yet when people are gathering possession they seem to get away with it.
It's bizarre.
I don't know why.
Raining in the ball on the deck and popping it up. It was just complete blind spot, because Price was trying to milk the penalty and there wasn't a penalty there, fair enough, but the guy was offside and then the ball bounced to him and he played it, he popped it up, so that was a weird one. But as it was, the Scots were really reeling, and Fiku gets the ball in the broken field, and it's a 2-on-2. It shouldn't be a break for Pinot, but he does this little straighten with one hand, and Duhan just gets sucked into his majesty.
He does,
and then he just flicks it out.
Runner, to be honest.
And he finds Pinot then as Duhan squares his feet for no reason and is facing in, and he finds Pinot on the outside. Pinot puts the little chip in, takes a wild French bends, and Dante
benefits from
jogs
it.
in.
He deserved one. He did. He was mighty throughout. His hands have improved no end. He actually the Australian tour he was on last year really kind of made him a real feature in this squad. And geez, looking at those centres now, it's going to be tough for guys like Vakatawa to get back into this team.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick him right now.
No,
he's not in the form to justify it.
No, indeed, and that's just serious options that this French team have, and just serious weapons out there. And yes, it was another just beautifully taken try, but then that's the swing then in it, like, and it goes back to that Hogg moment as well. Like, it didn't need to. It was 7 points on the floor, sure, but it didn't need to be compounded into effectively a 21-point swing in 5 minutes of play. But that's what they ended up with, and then suddenly the gap was 16, because in both of those very important tries, Jaminet, who had been having a rough day from the boot, it was a windy day in Murrayfield and he missed a couple, but the one just before half time from the touchline bisected the posts to make it 19-10, and then just after half time again from an angle bisected the post once more and made it 26-10, which is just suddenly a 16-point game. Massive task for Scotland, and massive thing to come back from, but doesn't necessarily again excuse their rationale for trying to do that by running at them from everywhere.
Indeed, they played a very naive game from that point, and actually, to be fair, they probably held it together for a little bit. They had a couple of red zone sets that they got that were turned over.
It was a familiar tale being painted of their own worst enemy. Like, they'd get a bit of pressure, get into a good position, and then it would be their own ill discipline that would do it either. Like, at one point on 15 minutes or so, they went off their feet when they were like near the 5 meters thing. They were just diving over the top.
That was
of their
the
own ball.
Haining coming over Fagerson. That was a set that they
yield.
It just ran out of steam. It was off a line out, but really the play before they should have done better as well. They had some decent attacks. They got in on 52 minutes. Kroos again made another disguised steal straight off a maul. They got the ball to the back, and then he just got his arms over and poached the ball. They got a penalty, and I think it was from there. I think about 52 minutes that Scotland resolved to basically stop playing rugby, because even after they'd gone 26-10 down, they settled down a little, got themselves a couple of red zone sets, were repelled by that phenomenal French defence, which was eating them alive in the contact area and at the breakdown. Aldred with some huge plays, Dante on the inside, Kroos everywhere,
Fiku shutting most things down.
It was very impressive stuff. And then from there they gave up on their own game. The Scottish game at its best is kicking yourselves into a position where you can launch off a kind of a midfield set piece, and they abandoned that. They really stopped going to it. They started running the ball from everywhere. They had another as well, Movaka, on one of Scotland's many attempts, but one of their better ones. They managed to work a little bit of space for Darcy Graham after a good kicking exchange. He got to run back at the defence, tried a little chip and chase, and then Movaka plucks it out of the air, dances past a few players and completely flips the script of the game. And then Scotland are backed up, and what do? Lose patience, run the ball again, start running the ball against a defence that's matching up so well against them. Inevitably going through all the phases that they were going through, they ended up getting stripped by guess who? Gail Fiku. And then they move the ball to the right, and Penaud jogs in for an easy score.
Relatively handy one for that one, unopposed, and just a hammer blow. That was the fifth at that point, and it was already a good game, and it could have been any score really for that period. Scotland were with the ball doing kind of helter-skelter mad stuff and not looking like they were going to get any purchase, and then when it was inevitably turned over, they at this point were really struggling to deal with what France were bringing then, and bar a few really good Daragh steals that were popping up throughout the game, they would have been losing this by quite a bit more. Like, at one point they were really close on the 5 metre line, hammering away, and then Daragh managed to get in on like 70 odd minutes and steal that, and it's just
the last 20 as well. Like they resolved, I don't know what Gregor Townsend was thinking, but they were like, we're going to still play this helter-skelter from our own half, try and score all of the points we need right now, style of rugby, but we're also going to take Finn Russell off and put Blair Kinghorn at 10, and I think it's safe to say that experiment's put to bed. He found a nice try at the end of the game, dancing through, because he's a pretty solid fullback option for them, but at 10, put in that position, especially with the way Scotland's offence works, where everyone's sitting really wide, especially when they're chasing a game, he actually can't make the passes that Russell can make, and I understand the frustration with Russell. He didn't play a great game here. He got outdone by Fiku. He couldn't open up the defence.
It's more the brains trust in general, not just Russell, but the Russell Hogg axis between them, and then the collective of all of the whole team just panicking the way it was. That's where you kind of
indeed he's frustrating, but they don't have another option at 10 who can work an offence at all. Like they just become a very different, very limited team without him. He's what gives them their offensive X factor, and without him it gets very, very ugly.
It does.
As Blair Kinghorn was trying those same skip passes that Russell tries and missing quite a few of them.
It's true. They were under all kinds of pressure, and then another turnover. The final try for France came from a nice little flat kick.
Good little set piece move.
Nice little strike move for again Pinot to just glide in unopposed over on the far side with I think it was Graham chasing over, but nowhere near. That was another very tidy one to wrap up France's scoring. Scotland did get that consolation try you alluded to there with Blair Kinghorn on the counter attack finding Doohan, and Doohan going in for a deserved score because he was kind of game all day long, and it kind of went to and fro. It's always a tough task when you have Pinot opposite you and you have to defend those French, but with the interventions he did contribute as well. But Scotland were just not quite at the races here, and France very much were. They were looking awesome, looking every inch the probable champions that they are at this point.
The defence is extraordinary. The forward operators that they have just making all kinds of plays. They beat up on that Scottish tight five. I mean, Gilchrist and Skinner, like they were routinely missing clean outs. They weren't able to physically impose themselves at all. And then Gael Ficou we've talked about, but Dupont as well. I was saying, like, this performance from Dupont for me was like I have been very much leaning on the Aaron Smith's still the best 9 in the world. Look at that man pass and run a tempoed offense. I've been on that side of the fence there, and like Aaron Smith could yet win me back, and he is awesome. But I think you have to give it to Dupont now. You might even have to give best player in the world to Dupont now, because this performance, like on all sides of the ball, was incredible. And it was
defensive plays where he did have Ali Price in his back pocket. It seems some of the charging he did away, break from the line. He knows perfect timing to do that. His deceptive physicality.
But the marriage of all of his attributes, his speed, his physicality, with just this genius brain on all sides of the ball, where he just understands the game so well. He's making brilliant reads, like an outside centre, like Lecanio Am on defence, knows exactly when to shoot, so rarely makes an error, sticks all of his tackles, makes explosive defensive plays. We know about his offence, how good he was on the kick return, but the tempo that he runs, and then even little things like the scrum, as you say, was this pulsing battle, and whenever Dupont fed it, like a few times in this game, when he noticed that the Scots had the edge, he would wait and he would linger and he'd be like, no, if I put this ball in, I think the Scots are going to go forward. And that was the only reason he was doing it, but he was feigning some complaint to the ref, and then he'd allow the French to adjust, and then if he had to put it in, he'd put it in only after the adjustment. And you could see the Scots getting frustrated, like Xander's like, I have an edge, I want to push, we're going to put it in, and then he kind of loses his momentum, and then the ball comes in. Like even the timing of that from Dupont was so class. I mean,
true.
I want to say
his capacity to clear rucks, I think it wasn't quite as much as challenged in this game as it had been, but I think it might have been even in that All Black game, but some of the ones for Toulouse as well. His capacity to clear rucks that are under serious pressure is probably better than any 9 out there. Like, very often you see a 9 get scragged, and then he's in. When he gets scragged, he manages to get it away and get the ball away very quickly, which is a useful skill, particularly for a French type offense. You want to clear those rucks as best you can. He's expert at it.
He's starting to look nearly as complete a player as any that I've seen since maybe O'Driscoll.
He does look a very, very tidy asset, and that's not to say that they're not swimming in choices, because like Luku played well when he came on as well, and they also behind Luku have just a smorgasbord of other like test level caliber scrum halves that other teams would be like chomping at the bit to get in there. Certainly I think we could use some French level halfbacks just in our terms of our offensive kind of inklings, but Dupont is just a level above all of those guys, who I wouldn't even worry about, to be honest. Like Huyu was great in the summer in Australia.
You'd just be worried about the
lack of Dupont. It's not that the halfback
position
is going to be compromised.
Isn't going to make those plays.
You're just going to be missing a world class Dupont. So he's a serious asset that they're going to build this team around, and they're dead right too. Like Le Petit Général, it is very much the tradition. The 9 is very much more of a fulcrum than the 10 in French rugby traditionally, and for it to be this guy at the minute just puts them in a really, really strong place. He's looking brilliant.
The defense, the Edwards defense, looks incredible. Everything looks incredible. The only fear that they'd have is that they're peaking too early, but that doesn't matter. What matters now for them is seeing this tournament out. They look head and shoulders the best team in it. They've two games to go, and they'll be 3 from 3 so far. 1 home, 1 away, or 1 away, 1 home. That's how they round it off. They look good enough for it. They definitely should be putting the foot in the accelerator. Absolutely. And then on the flip side for Scotland, obviously another year goes by. They didn't win it. I was just kind of the summary of the Scots is that they're a good team. They do lots of things right. They have lots of exciting players. They'll never be a great team unless they get wiser.
Yeah.
They're so immature for a team of as much years as they have.
Years and as many caps as they do have
yeah.
in key positions. But yeah, they do just play a bizarrely stupid game sometimes, and it just defies kind of form and caliber of player and just flies against all of that. It's very hard to read because they implode sometimes.
Yeah,
it's very tough to watch.
We'll contrast with the game that we're about to watch.
Yeah.
Scotland being 16 points down and flipping the whole script on their game plan and panicking and being jittery in everything that they do, versus Wales being 17 points down at Twickenham and being totally calm and just trying to get some opportunities
and eventually getting some opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
One of these things is not like the other, and it's just wisdom is definitely something lacking in the Scottish camp. But that being said, like it was teed up to be a great game, and if that Harris moment had gone to hand and Scotland take the lead into half time, maybe we would have been treated to the humdinging classic that we might have had with Grand Slam or grandstand finish and all. But to be honest, I still think that probably France would have edged it just on balance, even if Scotland had played their A game for the full 80 minutes without panic mode being pressed. But as it was, it's credit to France the fact that Scotland ended up folding the way they do, because that is born of the pressure and the scores that they got and just the quality they were showing all over the park. So yeah, no, they're totally deserved winners and bonus point winners as well. So very useful if it does come down to 4 wins. But they're hunting 5.
They are, and geez, who could deny them now? Awesome performance from the French. Much respect. Well, no. Well, from Ireland's perspective, absolutely not. But we are going to move on now to the second game of the weekend. This was prime time on Saturday. The El Clasico of the Six Nations produced another tight, tense, very interesting game in Twickenham. It saw the English pack, I guess, through the boot of Marcus Smith see them home. They all 4 tries in the game were created by Wales.
That's true.
They did not manage to create a try themselves, but they did manage to eke themselves in front with a lot of penalty kicks and edge this contest. And they were, for my money, deserved winners. England.
I think so. Yeah, no, on balance, the result was pretty fair. 23-19, that one finished. But yeah, you're also right in pointing out that the 4 tries were probably created by Wales, including the English one. But yeah, no, like Wales, we were billing England as the defence that was kind of sneaky good, but actually Wales's defence was kind of pretty good in this one as well. Tompkins has definitely improved as a defender, no end, and he's been talking about
awesome.
that.
He's a great defender.
He's a good reader, but he was always, it's a bit like Gary Ringrose for ourselves. He was always making decent reads and then finding himself a bit lacking in the physicality to make the hit and stick that you need to back up a good read, and he's doing more of that now. He's like certainly was the disjointed.
He's maturing into a really good test level player. He was all talent and all potential when he first came into the team, and he was a little too early for him, and he wasn't at that level, and he was a little shocked by it.
Sure,
but now he looks well able for it.
Yeah, useful asset in the Welsh camp as well. Yeah, but no, a really good game, to be honest. I thought, like on second viewing more so than first viewing. On first viewing, I was very frustrated, particularly, well, to be honest, with the whistle of Mike Adamson, which was a talking point from this game.
And we will
get into that. But that it was frustrating me to watch on first viewing. But then on watching it back, going, it was actually pretty high quality stuff. And there's a reason these games end up tense and as a tense affair. It's just neither team is really willing to back down in this one at all. Even if they're being beaten or if they're outmatched, it just ends up being a bit kind of stickly, and it often goes down to the wire. And we had it again. It didn't look like it was going to for large periods. It looked like England were going to just edge their way away, but no, Wales had other ideas, and yeah, fair play to Wales' stick-to-itiveness as well.
Yeah, no question. The start of the game, it was brilliant. It was actually a brilliant little first sequence from England. I thought that Marcus Smith put the restart on an absolute dime. I was kind of a la Carberry's to Mac Hansen last week. It was just too high for the Welsh pod, and it's actually Cuthbert gets in the way of Watkins the guy in the position, but Cuthbert kind of moves into that position, and it bounces off Cuthbert's shoulder, and then up comes Noel kind of bats it back, and then Itoje plucks it out of the air to make his the first play of many in the game for him, and then they end up with a red zone attack, and then there is that instant sort of sign of some issues with the English offense. Marcus Smith actually breaks blind. At one point they're in the red zone here. They're moving from the left side of the pitch to the open side, and it's just kind of a miscommunication between Smith and Noel, because as they're breaking to the open side, Smith decides to pivot back blindside because he sees that Cuthbert's very narrow, and he gets the ball, and he has Slade running on his inside and Itoje kind of just standing there on his outside like, hello Marcus, what are you doing here? I thought you were over there. But what kind of needed to happen, and what I imagine Marcus wanted, was Jack Noel, who was the left winger, to come sweeping around out behind Itoje, and then there's a try there if he does that. But Noel was busy running to the 13 channel on the other side of the pitch.
There's a little bit of that all over this offense, where it just looks a little disconnected in terms of what they're all trying to do.
Where with Smith and Quins, like, it feels almost telepathic what he has going with that back line, like where he just picks an angle and then the wingers and the centres just pick an angle off him, and it just gels together, and it's really a sign of the wonderful sort of telepathy that's been created within that system and within that offense by Nick Evans. That's not here for England. Everyone's kind of on a different page, and that was the early indication of that, and they end up getting jackaled, but then Wales tap and go a penalty and move it to the outside of the field.
And credit to Adamson on this one. That was the first quick tap I have ever seen him let go. Genuinely, I'd never seen him let a quick tap go before then, and he did, but it wasn't a wise quick tap from Wales' point of view, because they went right down a blind alley and got turned over.
Finds its way to Cuthbert, and Noel tackles him into Itoje, and then Itoje jackals the ball, and England get the lead.
That was probably an example of what Wales might have been missing, and like they dropped Louis Rees-Zammit, and to be honest, that's kind of based on form. Like, Cuthbert's been playing well this season, Louis Rees-Zammit has been struggling this season, and they tried to accommodate, and they kind of picked on form. But in that particular space, on that particular kind of moment, what you want is a guy like Louis Rees-Zammit on the end of that pass to try and maybe drop it on the toe and chase it, or do something not as kind of
look for contact a little.
Look for contact. Cuthbert did run for contact for it, and it ended up being
he ran very well in this game, did Cuthbert? He did. But down a blind alley on that occasion. And England took that lead through that jackal penalty, which was to be a theme of the day. They kicked deep again off the restart. It was I think Itoje and Dombrand combined to recover a box kick, and that was one of the surprise elements of this game, was Harry Randall's box kicks being recovered by England consistently. The shallow box kicks that didn't play in the Welsh back three, but instead left it sort of a mess in the air. And it was like they would only go about 15 or 20 metres, and then it would be a bunch of forwards, and it was amazing how often England managed to recover the ball off them.
Obviously dialed that in. They do a lot of dialing in, kind of, for the forwards are hungry off those kick, like very often Sarries do it as well, the box kick to not contest, but just to smash the guy as he goes down and have a pot of forwards ready to bridge over the ruck. That was one they were employing for a couple of seasons. This is a slight variation, just go shallow to try and kind of offset the fact that Liam Williams is back there for Wales, and Biggar, to be honest. He was very good in the air. So some good tactical back and forth. And the same way that Wales did what we expected and kicked everything infield, and England had to try and recover off kick return. They were just the kicking game is always very high level and cerebral between these two teams.
England dialed in the box kick recovery, then pegged it down, then Wales trying to exit. Basham, it's one of the sloppier plays of the day. Dombrand goes in for a jackal and he just seals, and then it's like a fair call. He can't do that, and it's an easy 6-0 for England. Right under his own sticks. A bit of a sloppy one from Basham. And then sort of what happened was the very next thing that happened is Wales actually had their first moment of the game off a Stewart drop. They kicked it into the corner. Daly was forced to.
He was a little lethargic in dealing with it. Kind of picked it up soon and then was bundled over for a scrum 5.
And then we have to talk about Mikeson here.
It happens here. This is, and like Welsh fans, I'm sure were howling derision. But it doesn't even start with what was ended up being a very annoying one. But it's the scrum. And you won't be able to cite anything specific apart, like in terms of like if you're World Rugby reviewing the performance. Did he do anything wrong? Maybe not to the letter of the law, no. But he does just too much communication, wrong-headed. The first scrum was okay, then he reset it for no good reason, moved them further apart.
But this is it. I was trying to pinpoint exactly why, because it's a consistent thing at the scrums with Adamson. So you're looking at it going, why? What is it about this guy and not being able to set a scrum? Because it's still the same props, but actually, when you watch it back, you can see it's actually a pretty simple thing. The front rows are ready to engage in this opening scrum after Wales. It's a Welsh scrum attacking 5. They're ready to engage. They're less than a metre apart, but they're pretty close. They're unbind. they're all comfortable and they're ready to scrummage, and he blows his whistle before setting the scrum and comes into the middle and decides to lecture them on giving them a wider gap. He's really paranoid about encroachment on the pre-engage, and like, I'm trying to understand why, because actually by the time the game got to its end, they were only that far apart for all of the scrums that then started becoming scrums again. And it didn't look inordinately close. And then what resulted was they did take an extra step back, and they all ended up like kind of flat-footed a little bit, or too stretched out, and then the scrums were going down. And actually Sinclair in particular was annoyed with it. He's kind of a shorter guy as well, but having to give that much space, like, it's not supposed to be 2008 where you come flying into each other. So they're still only kind of gently going in, but they're too far extended. And so it ends up just being this kind of bizarre situation where a one prop is falling at near enough every scrum because they're too far apart. And Adamson, for all of his intervention of paranoia about encroachment, like, if he'd said nothing at all, the scrum would have been much better.
That's it. And like, you can't cite that as an error, but then the one that I will cite as an error, and it goes back to that quick tap thing, is that from the ensuing fidgy-widginess where we didn't actually get to see a scrum, a penalty is awarded to Wales, rightly or wrongly before any of that, but it's penalty Wales anyway. And like, England are not alive to the play, not alert. Adamson isn't alive, alert to the play, but Wales are, and like last year, they tap and go and crash over for a very good let's punish England for being sleepy try. Except no, the ref isn't alive to it and doesn't allow it and whistles it back for no good reason. I just, like, when you're combining that fidgy-widginess at set piece that everyone's railing at, you want quicker scrums anyway, and you're unnecessarily meddling to make it messier and be more confusing, then off the ensuing penalty, not allowing for it to go quick.
And
it
that's
creates those games that
thing,
are just so frustrating to watch, I'm sure very frustrating to play in, where it's just so stop-start that how could you have any rhythm? And then if you don't have any rhythm, then suddenly the 12 or the 13 hasn't touched the ball in around 6 or 7 minutes, and then he drops it, and now we're back to scrums again, and it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy of like no momentum in this game.
And Adamson's games are like a what's what of that happening. I mean, regardless of the teams he's reffing. But anyway, we won't linger on him. But that was a real issue anyway at that point. And as it was, Wales didn't get their score. They didn't get their quick tap try.
They kicked to the corner again from it, and they didn't end up scoring from it, did they?
No, I think Ewells actually managed to. They went for England. Destroyed them at the line out, and they did it by encroaching. Ironically, for all of his paranoia about encroachment at the scrum, he was blissfully unaware of encroachment at the line out.
But encroachment from the kick, because actually Bigger kicked it to the corner in that instance, and he wasn't on the mark. He was ahead of the mark. When he's allowed kick to the corner if you're ahead of the mark. You're just not allowed tap and go.
Adamson just moves the mark every time you tap and go on him. But anyway, we won't linger on that, Shane.
Yeah, I know.
They went for one of those clever lineouts where you try and throw it without a jumper to two. But to be fair to Ewells is just looking up and going,
aware of it.
I think they're going to do exactly that. He puts his big paw in and shuts it down, and they catch Wales off. It's a great defensive set, but as you say, unfortunate that Wales weren't allowed that.
Wales didn't want that set piece. They wanted the try they had just scored.
But then one of the more interesting moments, and this goes back to my probably harsh criticism of Cuthbert, because Cuthbert has been getting a lot of praise for his performance, and rightly so, because he looked very dynamic. And it was off that next play that England did a box kick exit. It went infield, and Cuthbert had like this bustling run where he sits down his first two players that are there in front of him and tears downfield before eventually being tackled by Freddie Stewart at the 22, and then he's poached by Cowan-Dickey. And there's a couple of problems with this. The first is that he as he busts through, he does amazingly well to make the space. He's in the open field, he's running, and instead of looking up, he beelines for Freddie Stewart and tries to perp him and gets tackled. And for I think on 4 occasions in this game, he took the ball into contact and got poached. And they were talking about his run meters. Like, I think he had something like 170 run meters in the game, and I think all of them at the ensuing ruck ended in an English turnover. But on this occasion, like, instead of beeline into Freddie Stewart, he should have looked to his left, because Josh Adams was hugging that touchline with his arm up, and there was nobody looking. If he could have just floated a pass, he actually had the room, even if he wanted to kick it. The pass is the better option there. But he should have tried.
You got to find the man. You got to find Josh Adams.
Yeah, exactly. It was a try, and that was one of those ones that Wales need to be taking those nice.
Well, that was it last year. They're taking those tries, and this year they're not, and that's kind of the difference. Swings and roundabouts, but you got to be accurate in those moments, particularly in Twickenham. You got to take every point that's going, and already Wales kind of a bit profligate with their chances early doors, and struggling to keep in touch then with England as they were just kind of chipping along, happy to take 3 points because the Welsh defence were kind of bottling them up for the most part. But
there was some kind of probing Marcus Smith offence towards the tail end of the half. Of it
was off that kick return though, because that infield kicking was a factor. Like they weren't, and we were highlighting it before, just Wales will refuse to give England any lineouts by their own volition. They will kick everything infield, and they did by and large, and it just meant you had to try and dial in. We saw Freddie Stewart trying to get his kick return game going. You saw Marcus Smith then trying to launch off that ensuing play, and it's just even tougher for a fledgling offense to do that off kick return than it is off set piece. Off set piece you have a plan anyway, you know where certain personnel are going to be, whereas off kick return it's a little bit more chaotic. Sometimes the pods have to form very quickly, and it was a struggle for England to try and just cut through this Welsh defence.
But to be fair to them, in the ensuing moments after they repelled Wales, Wales's couple of try opportunities and still had the 6-0 lead, they had a more promising offensive sequence where Smith actually did have one of the things that was a problem in this game, as well as guys not being in sync with him, was just too few options. He was very often having to dump it off, and usually dumping it off was the right play, just to the nearest runner running a short line, because there just weren't those sweeping options that you'd associate with the English offense. But on one occasion he did have 2 different options to his right, and on that occasion he was able to stand up and step Adam Beard, slip another pass away, which he did lovelily on 2 occasions, and put a man through the hole. I think it was Jamie George. That ended up in like a long protracted sequence of England being down in the Welsh half. I think Wales managed to repel them once, but then they did a good box kick recovery, managed to slide the ball down into the corner with another probing offensive kick. And they're still, one of the things about this England team, especially in the absence of Tuilagi, is they're still very good with the little offensive kicks.
They are,
and they put one in behind Liam Williams, forced him to take it out into his own in goal, and then set up the drive, which probably should have been a try, where they played very good, very narrow. There was good tempo to the offense. Smith was probing, they were all probing. Don Brandt got some huge carries, and it was gonna be a try until Liam Williams just decided
that it wasn't going to be a try. He's now see sometimes the criticism of him being a bit of a scumbag is probably not entirely unfounded. He definitely has some of those traits, but that's a useful thing. He's a very hard man in all senses of the word. He's physical, but he's wise in that regard. Wily like a Welshman, recognises where the danger is and puts his big paw out there to stop it. And
he usually gives away annoyingly good cards for his own team. And he did on this occasion there. He just pawed at the ball and got yellow carded for it. Took the card for the team, stopped the try, and England actually went for the try. And then this was the second of the long protracted scrum breaks. It was 4 resets from Adamson. And this is where all of the good play that had been going on, the interesting kicking games, some great English attacks, some great Welsh defence,
just gone.
And
a chunk of the sin bin
forgotten. All of the rugby that was going on was forgotten because of all this stoppages. And there was an injury, and Adamson waited for an injury to end, then went to a TMO to check if the ball had been grounded in the previous play, or I think it was to check to carded Williams. England go for a scrum, resets it 4 times, and a winger hasn't seen any of the ball in I think about 10 or 12 minutes now, or something ridiculous in real time. In game time, I think 3 minutes were off the sin bin by the time the scrum got set. And it was a bit of clever play from Wyn Jones, because he was still doing this mind the gap business, and Sinclair's obviously really stretched out as a kind of a stocky guy that he is. He wants to get in tighter, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think the gap needs to be as long as Mikeson thinks it should be. And Wyn Jones just does the very clever thing of, instead of engaging, just taking a step back, and it's on the far side, and of course guess who misses it. But Sinclair's just annoyed and stands up, is like, oh come on, I can't, and then penalty against you, Sinclair. And
that's exactly the kind of penalty Wales do tend to get against England, and it will tilt an English pack very quickly. It will certainly tilt an English tight head, that kind of shenanigans.
He's just reading what's going on in front of him. This guy is going to buy it if I take a step back here. He's going to get Sinclair, isn't he? And sure enough he did, and Wales managed to escape, and it was a big enough play in the match because it kept it going.
geez, it could have been such a swing, and then it vindicates entirely Liam Williams. That coupled with Liam Williams' decision then vindicates the card, because they get through. I think they did concede 3 points during that sin bin period, didn't they?
Yes, towards the very tail end.
Towards the end of it, but it was only 3-0 that they lost it. So ultimately, yes, total vindication for the very cynical slapping play that Liam Williams did contribute there. But they did survive, which has kind of been a theme of this Welsh team this year, is just kind of get out of jail free cards and then eventually not quite coming good. But they do have a lot of hustle about them, all about the pitch, to be honest. It's very admirable how much you can't write them off, and how many kind of wily and clever little plays they'll do to try and just save themselves in desperate times. And yes, as you were saying, to contrast with Scotland and the panic button being pushed, Wales, just even when they're under the cosh, don't tend to panic like that. In fact, they come up with pretty clever, shrewd stuff by contrast.
And I think during the sin bin period, we did see, probably, and from an Ireland perspective, a little prelude into what this English offence, this particular iteration of the English offence, can be and probably will be at its best. When off kick return, they were in this. They moved the ball smartly to one side of the pitch than the other. So Smith went dancing down the right hand side of the field and fed Malins. It was actually off a scrum, my mistake. So Smith danced down the touchline, fed Malins, and they went down the right hand side of the field, caught a couple of Welshmen there, and then Smith got back into position, went back as the trail runner in the screen off a Toji, and then all of the backline were sitting really deep outside him, and then they showed like what they can be is the quality of pass to basically stretch the whole field. Smith got the ball down near the right touchline, fizzed a pass to Slade, which was like about a 10-12 metre pass, and then Slade with another kind of 15 metre pass out to Daly, all sitting too deep, forcing the Welsh outside defence to come up, and the backfield crucially to come up and respect the chance that they're going to run it. And then Daly, of course, can just drop it onto the toe, put a beautiful kick in behind, and that's kind of what England, I think, can be. I don't think they need to be the run it from the midfield everywhere. Obviously off set piece things are different, but what they can be is kind of pull your backfield around enough to trust one of those midfield guys to put in a really quality kick, and Daly did on that occasion.
To be fair, that's been the balance of them. Like even during that World Cup campaign, when they were either having Tuilagi in to give them ballast, or when they were rotating doing the Ford Farrell Slade thing, then they became a bit more of a sit deep, try and probe you with attacking kicks for the wingers to chase and that kind of stuff. They have really,
that
really
pendulum.
Good, they do
disrupt it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one other aspect of this offense is obviously the telepathy between Dombrandt and Smith in terms of their club level stuff, and he runs good lines off him. But also, and it's not a club relationship, but actually Malins seems to get him. And it's been the last few weeks. Malins does seem to understand what he's doing. He's often there as the guy that Smith finds with the pass. So it's a good little bit of fledgling telepathy at test level between those two, and obviously more minutes, more reps, you'll see more of that. So from an Irish point of view, as you were saying, something to watch out for in a couple of weeks' time in Twickenham.
Indeed. The first 9 points for the 9-0, by the way, were all defensive penalties for England. It was the second ceiling one against Rowlands, but again under pressure on the jackal from Dombrandt.
You kind of give credit to Dombrandt for getting in there and making that happen.
Exactly, but it was their offense, for all of its probiness, wasn't yielding them any points.
Incisive. And it's true as well, like with that centre partnership that we were highlighting, yes, they do have that ability to discombobulate your backfield and probe with kicks, but what they don't tend to have, which they do in spades with Tuilagi, is just the ability to sit you down. Down hard.
They would have scored were it not for the Liam Williams yellow card and the ensuing ridiculousness at scrum time. They would have got a try there. So it's probably a little bit of an anomalous stat in that sense. But England ultimately, I think there was a lovely and exact replica of that play, only this time with Slade in the kicking position, and it was a 50-22, and that led to them nearly scoring again when Wyn Jones managed to shut down that 52-metre maul. That was one of my favourite plays of the game, actually, after England pegged the corner with the 50-22 towards the tail end of the first half, and then they tried a trick play off the line out where Itoje popped it down to Laws to try and form a maul, and Wyn Jones was just so wise to it, he just sees the ball coming down and just yanks Laws to the floor. He was sniffing out everything. He yanked him straight to Faletau as well. He almost moved him to Faletau, and Faletau got the jackal steal, and they managed to repel them. He's one of my favourite players. He's so sneaky.
He is very sneaky. As props come, certainly as you said, props come. He manages to fly under the radar more than most would in terms of those little wily plays that you got to give credit for. It's very frustrating when he does it against your team and you're like, you can't keep getting away with it. But when you get away with it, it's a really good play. The defence from Wales was quite impressive. I thought that was the other side of you can be critical of England's offence being fledgling and not quite being accurate, but little plays like that were the reason why. They're dealing with a top test level defence in there. So Wales did give as good as they got there, and it just became one of those tighter games that England were edging all the way up, and that was half time, wasn't it? 12-0 at that point?
They had one. Their offense finally yielded points before the half. They had their best sequence of the match with Smith busted through Tompkins off a pullback pass, and he finally got a bit of space, managed to dump the ball to Malins again, as you say, and then they just ran straight, won some contacts. They put the ball through hands on a number of occasions, like it was a Toji to Smith to Laws to power carry, get a bit of tempo going.
They do
until
want
Wales
had
had seen enough and gave up a penalty.
This is it. Wales have the wisdom to at least give up the penalty and not anything more. But it's good to see England's forwards are keen to put it through those hands like that, and just you can see there were little glimpses, and there have been in all three of the games, of what could be about to happen in England, but it is just a coulda, woulda, shoulda, and Wales made sure it was only a coulda, woulda, shoulda, because as soon as it looked like it was going to be anything more, it became a penalty that had to be given because Wales would kill it. So they kicked the 3 and it was 12-0 at half time, and it looked like they were just going to cruise on because it didn't look like Wales were going to be able to break them down themselves, but the second half told a different story.
It did. Initially it was all England. Obviously they got on top of Wales, they put the ball in the corner. It was Malins again combining with Slade this time, worked down the right hand side, and the Welsh defence basically they did front up, but Smith dabbed it into the corner, and then obviously this line out happened, and it was a very curious little manoeuvre from Itoje.
It worked.
It was I can't believe they didn't review it. He just shouldered Beard comes running up and he's ready to jump, and just as he jumps to Itoje, because they'd been trying it all game, they'd been just like, how much can we get away with this? And then Itoje was like, maybe even this much. And then the ball sailed over to Dombrandt, and Elias probably shouldn't throw it. I think it's one of those ones where when you're trying to overtime it to get it right on the tip of the jump and there was no contest, probably very harsh. I'm probably stretching really to call this a Welsh error is probably a stretch. It should have been a penalty. But instead he overthrows it to Dombrandt, who gathers it brilliantly and does finish. Some people were saying he didn't get it down. He absolutely got it down before the sliding tackle.
Yes, that's true. He did get it down.
But I mean, how do you not review Itoje walking through the line out, shouldering
the same credit you were giving to Wyn Jones? Give it to Itoje. If you get away with it, it's just a good, clever play. It was like I remember watching Leinster play a game against Leicester many years ago, where we stole all of their lineouts, but the way they did it was just by playing the arm. Just both of them would just go up and play the arm every time and get away with it, and it's like,
the ref's not looking.
The ref's not looking, can't get mad. Same story there.
It's a case to be made in that instance for the old captain's challenge could be dusted off and brought back, but it's only for refs of a calibre of this guy where that is somehow missed and not reviewed. But
of all the 50 odd, what was the stat you had? He has 2 Six Nations games and he's given 50 penalties. In total.
Not that one.
Not that one. That glaringly obvious one managed to slip through the cracks, but there were 50 other penalties over the course of 2 games. That was a bizarre moment, and obviously you'd feel aggrieved if you were Welsh, not least because of that. And then you go back to the one I was having, the quick tap try that they'd scored that wasn't rewarded, all of that stuff. So you would be feeling aggrieved at that point, but it was well taken by Dombrandt, gratefully taken by Dombrandt, and that put a bit of daylight then, a fair bit of daylight at this point. It looked like good.
Well, it was
good
17.
Game.
It was 17-0.
Just looked like handshakes time. But credit to Wales, that is a bigger gap than Scotland were facing when they were kind of hitting the implode button, but Wales didn't. They kind of stuck to their guns and didn't panic at all, and managed to they had a purple patch that came.
They were repelled, but eventually a little probing kick got them an offensive set where Williams kind of forced Malins to take the ball out into touch, and then they got a red zone set, and they were very patient. They stuck to their guns. It was Tompkins who had another great carry, as he always did, that kind of gave them a bit of impetus. That was what set up the red zone drive. And England were still showing that same hunger. Itoje was ever a smashing Faletau back.
Yes.
But Wales kept it going, kept a bit of momentum, had a good carry from Owen Watkin, set up Thomas Williams to just pick it very quickly and then fizz it across. And I think it was actually Freddie Stewart who had a brilliant game but was completely caught out. He bought in on the inside man and the pass just fizzed out behind him to the lonely Josh Adams, who didn't get much to do in this game but was still waiting on the wing for someone to throw that pass to him, and he'd finish the try, and sure enough he was there to do it. Finally it happened. It should have happened in the first half, you were right to point out, but it did happen there. And then another score as well, not too much farther behind it. This was when it was like, holy, what's happening here? It's like off the very next set, Gareth Thomas, the backup prop, comes up with a huge steal, and then Wales instantly flash it left. Liam Williams glides into the open field and then combines with Josh Adams, and between them they manage to run about between 22 to 22. And Wales are back in there again, and they squeeze England. We're like they get a penalty, kick it to the corner, squeeze them, work it to the posts, and then Tompkins takes a very well deserved
he definitely deserved one for the amount of defensive work he got through. He's making tackles for days as well, but just over the course of his couple of seasons it's good to see him crash over against the English, to be honest, and fair play to him. And then that was, what was it, 17-12 at that point?
Indeed,
heading into the denouement of the game.
But guess who? I mean, and listen, this is why I'm being harsh on him, but like if you rewatch the game, he comes up with some clutch mistakes where Cuthbert, our best friend, after turning over England in the 22, gets the ball in a bit of space, and for the fourth time in the game turns the ball over, falls on the wrong side. Noel poaches him this time, and it is a criticism. Like he trucks it into contact, like he carries brilliantly, and there is reason to reward him for this game and be proud of him, because he ran very, very well. He beat defenders. He's a great runner, but he needs to smarten up in terms of his breakdown, in terms of his work. Like when you're a ball carrier, you have a responsibility probably first, more than any cleaner, to protect the football. And he falls forward and then tries to fight for the extra yard, like he's an NFL player going for a first down, but it ends up presenting it to Noel basically, instead of fighting to get the ball back away from the English jackal defence. And England get like their fourth kickable jackal penalty, which is really what the difference was between the sides.
To be honest. It's playing too much rugby in your own half, as the old adage is, but it's also just inviting the English game into it, and they were able to chip a cheap enough three, which
felt like the game right there.
It just burst the balloon of that momentum of the comeback. 20 suddenly it's 20 points to 12. It's not a one score game anymore, but Wales did recover. They didn't panic entirely. Like they managed to recover a short restart actually immediately after, but then they did knock that one on, I think. But they were still in that game. But you're right in saying that 3 point was pretty climactic.
They very quickly got another for ironically a line out penalty from Wales where Beard grabbed Ezequel's hand, and it was like, we're reffing that
was
now.
like, I thought we were allowed. I
thought it was free reign. But no, and Smith nailed a really tough kick then. He did kick very well. He just won early doors, but outside of that, kicked brilliantly and made it 23-12. And obviously there was a bit of drama at the end as Hardy gets over with the quick tap penalty.
Little quick tap penalty,
Great to see Adamson relents in that stare down. Wales want to go quickly. You gotta let him.
Let him do it. And that was officially the second quick tap that I've ever seen Adamson. They both came in this game.
Because of Wales.
Because Wales want to do it. But 2 out of 3 ain't bad, I guess. Apart from the fact that one of those 3 was a try that should have been awarded. But sure, look. Fair play to Hardy, who has a great knack and a great track record against England for scoring that exact try. If they can do that every year forever, they'll be delighted to keep picking him for this fixture, because England still need to look at them. There's a whole new England team, and yet still the same little vice that they can be caught out cold. It was towards the tail end of a game, but it threw it back into the balance. It meant suddenly there was something to play for in the last play, which it really didn't feel like there was going to be, certainly throughout the course of the first half. And then even after those couple of 3-pointers to push it out to 23-12, it felt like game over, handshakes time. But suddenly there was something thrown back into the mix.
Gave up too many red zone tries, didn't score enough tries of their own, didn't really score any. Did manage to probe, but saw the win home. And to be fair, Itoje, what a deserved figure to come up with that game winning jackal
at the end.
Marcus Smith got man of the match. He played okay,
as winning tens are wont to do.
He kicked extremely well, like even down to the opening restart, but especially the kicks from the tee. There were some clutch ones in there, and he did start getting things going. He did get them moving moving forward, kicking and screaming a little bit. But to be honest, this game was won by the jackling stealing of the likes of Itoje and Dombrandt, and just that physicality and dexterity that they had in and around the ruck area. The ruck is becoming one of the themes of the year in terms of fulcrum areas that teams are looking to go after more, even it feels like, than usual.
Certainly Joe Schmidt would always highlight that it's the heartbeat of the game, and it's very much a focus, and it is very true in modern rugby. You have to be operating. The team
that's winning the ruck seems to be winning these games.
That's true. That's very often where it boils down to, more even than the set piece, and the set piece is very important too. Like, so if you're dominating a set piece, then you can win a game. But there's sometimes you're winning a set piece, but you don't necessarily win the game overall. But the breakdown is one that people can't seem to function without. You need to be able to secure your own ball, but also you need to be able to make a mess of the opponents. And normally those two sides, they're kind of two sides of the same coin, because it all is based on collisions. If you're winning the collision at impact first,
and it comes down to other things like just how the quality of your first phase as well. Are you hitting soft shoulders? Are you putting the ball in the right place where the defence is having to retreat? Or are you getting smashed behind the gain line and then all of a sudden the defence is coming onto the ball? All of those things factor into who's on top in the ruck. But it was very much the point of difference in this game.
And it is definitely something that Wales have gone from massive strength over the last 10 plus years in that area to slight weakness in these matchups.
Neither of their flankers played well. Moriarty and Basham both tried, but both gave up cheap penalties in bad moments.
They just lost their individual battles, and that was the winning or losing of the game. For Wales are traditionally a powerhouse, and they certainly recognise the importance of it, and they still give as good as they get. They still get plays off in the breakdown every now and then, even in games that they lose it in, but it's becoming more and more of a trend that they're operating with less and less of the ball and having to be more clinical with it as a result. But it kind of stems from the fact that their breakdown isn't quite as secure as it needs to be. And whereas England, by contrast, for all of the criticisms of maybe being disjointed, not being the finished article and whatnot, they're coming at it from a very, very good base anyway. They're former World Cup finalists in the last World Cup. They've kind of done a refurb. They have so many young, talented players in that squad now. And yet the nuts and bolts are still pretty good. Scrum's pretty good, line-out's pretty good, and breakdown very, very good.
Correct. So exactly. So they should be confident that they need to get sharper on offense. There's no doubt about that. They just need to refine that sort of flowing tempo, and then those options, those relentless options that guys are supposed to have on the offense that just weren't there. It was very much kind of Smith going down blind alley sometimes, nobody running off him, and he'd make something happen and link up with someone, but it was just a bit helter-skelter. They need to settle down. I don't know, actually, it escapes me now who was the guy Eddie Jones brought in this time around to take the offense. I think it might be a league guy. And considering the fact that they had to go through so many multi-phase sequences in this game, perhaps not the wisest thing, but they are going to need to figure that out.
That's true. They're going to come up against a couple of mean offenses now in the last couple of weeks.
Defenses too. Ireland are looking physical.
They are. And France are looking mighty. That Edmonds defence is going to be a big challenge for the couple of weeks coming. But in a very good place, and 2-1 for England means they're very much still in the hunt. It puts them in a good position now with the home game to come, and then a big daunting trip to Paris. Fair play to England. They were good value for this win, and credit to Wales as well. They stuck to it in all the ways, as we were saying, that Scotland managed to not do. They showed real good maturity and really good calm, and dug themselves out of it and put themselves in position to win a game that really you feel like they had very little right to. But that is one of their best traits, is their ability to do just that.
It is. Unfortunately, they had to bow out of their title defence this time around. It's not going to happen for them, but they're not as all is not doom and gloom in Wales. They have some serious potential. They got some young guys coming through, and they do have grit and wisdom in their team, which is not to be undervalued.
No, it's a really good thing. It's like traditions in teams, and the ethic of a team is very much kind of stamped, and it goes through more generations than one, and it's just very good traits all throughout this Welsh team. Obviously, they are a little bit overmatched sometimes, and
just so many injuries, so many key injuries that still lingers over them. But that was that game. Congratulations to England. They just about deserved it. Rode their luck at times, but they did just about deserve it.
I think so. Yeah.
Despite some messy refereeing, it was a compelling showdown. Definitely. Well won by the hosts. And that wrapped up Saturday. But then there was one more game to be had on Sunday. Ireland took on Italy in the Aviva Stadium in Dublin in a 3 p.m. kickoff. And it always sucks. It really it always sucks when the biggest, most interesting thing or talking point to come out of a game is a controversial law or decision.
Yes.
And in this instance, it's a law, not a decision issue.
No, it's not actually. In defence of the ref, because that was the poor Georgian lad. It was his first. Kelly was his first Six Nations game, and for it to be mired in such was unfortunate. But he actually did okay with it in the moment. In terms of, he was correct from the law point of view. He had to officiate it. It's if one of your front rowers has gone for foul play rather than an injury, then yes, you do end up getting it. Like it's an outdated law. It came in. Like, I'm pretty sure it actually came in when there were still only 22 men. It was only a 22-man game. They only had one prop substitute. And it was a bit of an issue that if a team was getting overmatched at scrum time, that there was a bit of tactical kind of fidgetiness that allowed you just to haul a prop out there to go uncontested and remove that massive kind of dominant factor from
I've literally
opponent.
seen it happen. It was a Premiership game as well, where it happened at one point that I think it might have been Bristol, actually, under Pat Lam. Took off a hooker and complained to the ref, oh listen, he's hurt, we got uncontested scrums, and the ref said, okay, you're with 14, and then so the hooker was back on.
Miraculous recovery.
So it does prevent that fidgetiness, but obviously in this scenario it's madness.
It was so harsh because obviously what happened was just the early injury that threw it into whack, and that was it was a dislocated elbow, and you could see it. It's a nasty injury. There's no hint of fakery going on there. The ref saw it.
The best solution towards faking injuries cannot be to punish real ones.
Indeed.
And that was like the red card for 5 for what it's worth was a red card. He popped up in the tackle.
He was upright anyway, and then he threw a pop up, and it was just not a good tackle. You can't do that.
Although someone rightly pointed out, Ryan Baird, much later in the game, Ryan Baird probably had one that could have been a red as well that was missed, and they do happen in the game. There was one in the England game as well that could have been given. Like it's funny when they're not reviewed, or why they're not reviewed sometimes. Often has to do with the host broadcaster,
or the crowd. The crowd has an influence, because the crowd did respond to that. It was a big hit on an Irishman, and you hear and then suddenly you look at it. Sure, Scotland had one as well, a big collision in that Scotland game, and it was only the howls of Murrayfield derision that got it pulled up. So
exactly right. So Ireland were probably lucky not to be red carded themselves later on. But the fact that they had to 14 men is like tough luck. Your hooker made a bad error, but 13 men was ludicrous, and to punish an injury like that, it was just ludicrous. And I think there's other solutions as well. I wonder why, and if player registry is the reason, I'll be annoyed, but why can't a prop scrummage at hooker? There's plenty of people who play prop.
I'm pretty sure
hooker.
you can opt to.
Was that not a better solution?
Yeah, I would have thought so, especially given one of the little subplots was Neymar who came in for him, I think, and he had a bloody brilliant game. Credit to him at 17 in there at hooker, kind of bewildering, like an absolutely bizarre job that was his charge, coming in to replace 2 hookers and a number 8 effectively as well, because they had to go without
and a winger a hooker, a number 8 and a winger
all rolled into one,
left the field, and on came a replacement prop, and he managed to hustle his heart out
very well. A couple of turnover steals, a nice little out the back pass to clear a ruck at one point. He was drawing my eye anyway. Was Neymar, but you're right in saying just hopelessly cruel, and then compounded by the fact that they actually finished with the 12 men because of the big Bramstein paw that ended up kind of highlighting it. It was just a bit silly at that point, and you could feel it in the crowd.
There was nothing you could do about that. Like, people were giving out about 12 men, it's ridiculous. The 13 was ridiculous. The 12 had to happen because
it was the same as Luke Cowan-Dickey's one in week 1, which the precedent is already set. You can't do that.
No, indeed, and that wasn't non-controversial. Italy did, for the record, defend pretty well in this game. They held their width really well. Part of this, and we'll talk about Ireland in a moment and how they didn't play well, but part of this was because Ireland were drifting on every offensive set, and they weren't ever really sat down. But to be fair to them, they stayed connected, they didn't shoot up, they spread the field really well, and they made their tackles.
Put in some good hits,
absolutely,
so including Neymar, but a lot of the other guys put in some good seismic hits on the Irish boys.
The defence seems much resolved. Like, again, it's that classic thing: last year's offense, this year's defence, put them together, we got ourselves a team. But the other side of the ball was tragic, even with 15 men.
There was a couple of moments before any of that stuff in the early going, like the opening try after 4 minutes from Ireland was good play. They were straightening. It was against 15 men. They were straightening. The options were good. Interplay between Daragh and O'Mahony, and then Sheehan, who was awesome. For my money, man of the match, they gave it to Josh van der Fleer. But just in the context of the 2-2s missing for Italy, while the number 2 for Ireland was just rampaging everywhere and involved in everything. And yes, he gave a good option, good ball inside to Carberry for the opening score. And that was a really lovely sequence of rugby from Ireland. And it was like, normal service, so teeing up a nice game, and then ultimately that came unstuck. But then by contrast, Italy's first attacking set was just so depressing, because it was off a maul, and then good maul, they managed to make some ground, and then Varney had quick ball, and he just looked around and no one was there. He had no one to pass to. They were all just trundling along, slowly folding around the corner, while Ireland just setting up a
before they even got into position of passway. Tadhg
is already into the thing. Yes, what is Varney to do? I have such sympathy for a halfback in that position, because that was early in the game and they still had 15 men, and it was just so slow.
The offense continues to be nowhere, and Italy will be nowhere as long as their offense is nowhere. It's like they're not folding into position. They're not attacking with any kind of structure or hunger. They look like they haven't. Thought about offense.
One person is running off nines with a bit of hunger, and then they go again and do it again. Like, one person will run, but the rest of them just aren't. They're oblivious to what's going on.
You need to run into position, and you need to give Garbisi a chance to kind of get set and get things going, and they just aren't at the moment. And that was why there was no intrigue in the game, even from early doors. They're like, well, Italy could frustrate Ireland in this game defensively, but they're not going to win it because they can't really attack. And that was kind of, that dynamic obviously was exacerbated by the nonsense 13 men. But they defended really well, and they got a good few poach steals. Like, they stayed connected, and Ireland got
a few himself.
Exactly. It was pretty great defence, really. They spread spread the field, and then every time Ireland cut inside, the guy made the tackle with his inside shoulder, and another guy showed the urgency that they didn't show in attack to get in and attack the ball. And on a good few occasions, Ireland were disconnected enough that it did yield a steal, and they were able to frustrate Ireland even with 13 men.
Yes, 100%. Well, like you were right in pointing out, they were drifting consistently, and Ireland were not adjusting necessarily well to it and overplaying their hand quite a lot. There's a slight loss of chemistry, and it was a changed side. Obviously, a guy like debutants, and it was a completely new back three, and it was Henshaw's first game back proper starting, and it was Joey Carberry starting at 10, and all of that combined to just... None of them were seizing control of what they needed to do. Particularly the 13-man challenge kind of sucked the atmosphere out of the stadium, and it sucked the life out of the game as well. And then from Ireland's point of view, it just looked like they laboured to do anything from that point on. And it's like it is obviously easier to play against 13 men than it is 15 men. But it was one where they were sticking to the wrong thing, sticking to their guns and trying to go pass, seeing that there's space over there and going like, let's get it to this phase.
Rather than throwing crazy offloads in the rain instead of just playing tight and direct, which they did when Sexton came on. But it was kind of a collective thing. It's tough even to blame Joey Carberry for it, because at one point, like, Peter O'Mahony broke a contact and then threw a reckless pass for no good reason. And you're like, well, he's captain out there and he doesn't need to do that. What I didn't like about when Carberry's play was just that he didn't run the structured offense like you should. He didn't square his shoulders and pass and get guys running short lines off him. He just didn't point the offense in the right direction. He just listed cross field with the rest of them, and they all kind of ended up playing a little like Joey. And like it was one step back after one step forward in Paris, unfortunately for Joey. Not that it really matters that much. I mean, it was a dead game. It was. I mean, there were some nice tries. Credit to Lowry getting a couple of tries, and then the most unselfish but correct play, because he wasn't necessarily going to get there. There was covering defenders. It was the right option to give the pass to James Lowe, and he did. And he'll get more credit in his bank than probably the hat-trick with the coaches for that, because that was the right play, well executed. So credit to him. And he was good value for his other two scores as well. Sexton put him in with a lovely bit of play as well. Lovely little pass for the second one that he got. But decent to see those guys kind of going well. James Lowe back in the fold. His left boot is still an asset that they probably won't ignore in terms of selection headaches for the bigger games. Their exit game just is so much better with him on the field, and his telepathy with Gibson Park is money both ways. His ball inside and
for
Sexton loves Lowe as well. They play really well off each other, but everyone's playing well off Sexton. The Sexton's probably the most encouraging thing about it. But yes, that was that game. 57-6 to Ireland. It finished 9 tries to none.
Couple of nice tries for us. Good to see both the locks getting involved, Baird and Treadwell getting on the board towards the end. They definitely benefited from the no scrummaging with any power at all, because they were fit as fiddles towards the tail end. Yeah, no, it broke up towards the tail end, and Ireland did pad their score. So in terms of net result from that game, it's a bonus point win for Ireland. It's a 51 point buffer that they managed to gain from it, 57 to 56. So that's a useful contribution, because Italy have defended better this season, and again that was true today in that game. But it ultimately leaves Ireland in a decent position, and actually I suppose that is a good little way to pivot on to where we stand now in the tournament. As of 3 rounds in the books, we're over the halfway point. The break obviously happens this week, and France are sitting pretty atop the picture with 14 points of a possible 15. That's very good innings from the first 3 games. Ireland then in second with 11, and England then in third with 10. The 2-1 teams chomping at the heels, and England are the only ones yet to play France. So in that picture, so all to play for those 3.
Yep.
And then a bit of distance, Scotland and Wales both on 5 points, but Scotland just ahead of them on the points differential, probably courtesy of Wales's week 1 really. But
well, indeed, yeah. But that does wrap up the Six Nations for now. It goes into its gap week now this week, this last gap week before the final 2 weeks, and we will be back next week obviously to preview all of the big games in the Six Nations, including 2 huge games. Wales trying to unstick France's momentum in Cardiff, that's going to be massive. France trying to set up the Grand Slam decider,
a big Friday game as well, that one.
Exactly, that'll be a good one. And then England and Ireland in Twickenham, 2 sides, both of them still in the hunt. England trying to keep it's still in their own hands. They beat Ireland, they can go to Paris with a chance to win the championship. Ireland obviously in a great position, need to get one of those big away wins, and also would keep them alive in the championship and give them a chance to set a target on the final day for France to try and beat. If they can beat Scotland and leave France in a situation where a losing bonus doesn't even do it for them, then Ireland are going to be in that great position. So that game is going to be huge for all kinds of reasons, as well as just the rugby reasons of 2 great teams and 2 fierce rivals going at it, as these 2 often do. So yeah, that's going to be a great week to look ahead to next week, and really looking forward to round 4. But for now, it does go on ice.
We're going to sign off on that. That's round 3 of the Six Nations in the books. And how are your team doing? Are they still in the hunt? Let us know in the comments down below who you got. But yeah, with that, we are going to park the Six Nations and move on to the landscape of Tier 2 in Europe, which is the Rugby Europe Championship, which also had its round 3 take place last week, over the course of last weekend. 2 games of the scheduled 3 were played. First up was Portugal, hosting for the first time. Their first home game of the season was against the Netherlands, and as we suspected, it was a chance for them to run in some nice tries for the Lisbon faithful and get a bit of momentum back into their campaign and some wind back in their sails, which they duly did. And then the game of the round was undoubtedly Spain hosting Romania, which, what a shock, what an amazing game that was.
What a tournament this is, week on week. The tempo, the quality, the shocks, each team getting plays off against each other, so evenly matched, so capable of brilliance on their day. And truly. Spain showed that, and we're going to tuck into that game now momentarily as well. That was such a feast for all fans of rugby, and hopefully if you had the chance you got to watch it, because it really was an excellent show from the Spaniards, and throws again the permutations for this World Cup stuff right into the balance once more, and that's just very exciting. But the opening game, as you say, was in Lisbon, Portugal hosting the Netherlands. 59 points to 3 it finished. Sans Marrakesh, no issues for them in this game. Yeah,
they still had more than enough quality to deal with the Dutch. But the Dutch did produce moment of quality as well, managed to get themselves on the board as well, which is all I kind of asked for them in our
with
preview
the 3-pointers.
Well. Got a 3-pointer to start the game. They took the lead, so they did.
And again, they took a while to break down as well.
It
was about 15 minutes before Portugal crossed the line. They held that 3-point lead for that time.
They did.
And then they were still in the game for some periods of it. It's the gas tank really that's shocking from them in the sense that it's probably just a consequence of not playing at that intensity as well. But by the time the second half rolls around or midway through it, they just can no longer fold into any kind of defensive shape and just let all kinds of plays happen.
It looks a little bit like when you saw that New Zealand Tonga game from the start of the summer last year, where it was just 2 levels to this sport, and like by the tail end of the second half, you do have sympathy for the Dutch in these matchups. But a few nice tries from it. I think 13 grabbed a nice one for Portugal at one point.
Pedro Betancourt is his name, and
yeah.
he's a find. The Portuguese Jonathan Davis and his grey scrum cap running
Yes,
about the
indeed,
place.
yeah.
He was making all kinds of plays out there, and definitely, I know Jose Lima will probably come back into the team, but one they might be looking at.
Nice to have options in the back line. They just run very nice runs. Storty was another one back in the fold. He'd been missing the first
great
couple of
try,
weeks.
great assist.
He's a serious player. We know that from last year's campaign, how dangerous he can be. He scored 4 tries in this particular matchup in Amsterdam last year.
That's right, yeah.
And he managed to get on the board again. He does enjoy playing the Dutch. But they have some good guys coming back like that, and it's just in the nick of time because they teed themselves up for that Iberian clash that's going to be pretty much what it all hangs on now, because obviously the landscape's changed a bit and they have played a fair few games, but they have a matchup with Spain in Madrid that is going to possibly be for all the marbles in terms of one of them might be out if they lose it. It's very tough.
Yeah, well, I'd say Portugal are still very much in this mix, and it is a case of 2 goes into 3 between themselves, Romania and Spain. And that was the other game, the big game of the weekend, which took place on Sunday at Estadio Central in UCM in Madrid. Spain 38, Romania 21, and wow, like I did not see that coming.
No,
that
did
was
not.
What a performance from the Spanish.
From the opening whistle, they were all over them. The pack were so mighty. They arrived way to the pitch. Their back row were monstrous and marauding. Their set piece was very tidy. Their maul was very, very good. But then just the angles of running and the speed that they were playing with. Rouet set the tempo beautifully from 9, as he does for them. Managed to get them moving, get those forwards on the ball, and then guys like Jimeno making serious cuts, scything cuts with ball in hand, just running that line that he runs very, very well and causing those new centres some problems in Romania.
They had their worst game in a Romanian shirt, both Tamani and Vavasa, even though Vavasa had some sparkling moments in this game.
2 tries. He took 2 tries with some very nice lines of his own, indeed. But not enough.
No, indeed. Romania just started slowly. They had a kick out in the full early. They had, in the opening few minutes,
a couple of cold drops from both of those two.
Tamani and Vavasa dropped the ball on first phase, and one of the stories of the match was just how poor their first phases were. Both the maul and the sort of midfield hit up that they like to work off, shut down by a really hungry Spanish defence. And Spain then on the inverse started the game. They got after Tamani's cold drop, they set up a scrum, and Ordaz kicks an incredible 50-22, as good as any you'd see at any level, and it seemed like the ball was travelling.
Downright Safa strike on it.
It did seem like the ball was travelling in the warm air in Madrid. But I mean, he kicked it. It's 60 metres on the pitch. It's probably 70 on the angle. It was something absolutely extraordinary kick from way deep in his half, all the way deep into the opposition 22.
About 10 metres out or so was where the line out was, so it was a very, very good attacking opportunity, and it just teed up the perfect start for Spain, which they duly took, which takes more than that to finish it, but
the Maul did the rest, but that was capitalising on that sort of soft belly of a lot of these teams in the Maul defence, which got better as the game went on. Actually, but that was a great start.
It did get better
Spain,
from both teams. Both teams reacted to the proactive mauls of the other and ended up getting some good defensive kind of plays off towards the end, which is unusual, you're right to point out. But Spain, their set piece was good. Their scrum was more than game as well. From the opening bell, and just they were moving the ball so well in the sunshine that they were catching the Romanians at 6 and 7.
They just started the game sluggishly, and having dropped the ball cold and conceded the 50-22 and conceded the ensuing maul try, their next offensive set was kind of similar. It was a midfield hit up. It was slow. They were extremely almost Italian-esque in terms of how they folded, and all it was ever going to be was a Surigiu box kick. He just leathered it down deep. There was no real pressure, and then off the ensuing counter-attack or ruck, they set up a ruck and flashed it wide, and Jimeno just cut them open.
Absolutely.
He did Vavasa came out of the line, tried to hit him, and he just did him, and then he was away. And they did a
teed it up so
wonderful
nicely.
bit of interplay there on the edge from the Spanish, working their way into the 22, and then from there they showed some drive, purpose and skill that the Romanians just couldn't match. Found their way to another try. Yeah, it was. I think it was Fools who got the score in the end. After a few narrow
he deserved it.
carries.
He had a very busy game in the back row, did Fools. So I was kind of glad to see him get over for a well deserved try as well. A bit of meat to go with the grunt work that they were doing.
It was a nice little soft hands from Ordas to put him in, but it was a lovely score built off the back of that wonderful counter attack off the kick that gave Spain instantly a two try lead. Which Romania are just a little lethargic about giving up those early leads. They did it there.
Well, it was painting a similar picture to what Portugal were doing to them out in Bucharest as well, and down to there was another try, quick enough try that followed, and suddenly they were 21, and you're just like, oh my god, what is happening? They haven't even arrived to the pitch, and suddenly
they did manage to get that score, and Spain did show their weakness when they got a good maul going after going 2 tries down. They managed to get one entry. And the Spanish showed, like, it was Towley, the number 8, who just gives away a yellow card instantly, and it was really like, there are ways that you can sack that maul and not give away a yellow card, but when it's trundling towards the line, just running around it and tackling the guy at the back of it is usually going to be a card. There's no even plausible deniability there, and Spain do need to work on that. But
just a little more subtlety to what they're doing when they do give away the penalty, even if their intention is to give away the penalty. Try and channel a bit more subtlety in there, because that was unequivocal. Exactly. And the Oaks did strike back, and it's good to see, because they were defiant, but they were still being blown away at that point. But the maul was a good in for them to go to. And
Vavasa cutting that lovely line to get himself on the board from close range off the back of that. And then Spain are a man down. Who knows? But actually, it was the capacity of the Spanish to score with the man down. After they again just brought that same power, that same tempo, and the Oaks kind of buckled, gave up a penalty of their own, and then Los Leones with 14 men decided to kick to the corner, such is the degree to which they backed themselves.
They were so bullish. They arrived to more of a pitch than you'd see them in certainly in the last 2 years. I don't remember them as motivated and as dialed in as they were.
They knew how big this game was, more perhaps than the Oaks seemed to. They knew this was huge, and they came at it with hunger and ferocity, and the forward carriers, the power of that pack.
Well, it meant they earned that try. Like, they were 14 men, but they weren't going to stop them, because they were too powerful in the contact, and they did crash over to make it 21-7, and they managed to put even more distance before them between them with another try as well to go 28-7 before half time. But I don't think that was as seminal as the defensive set that they then put in when Romania were trying to do what they did to Portugal a week or 2 weeks before, where they were way behind. It was 20-something to single figures, and you're going like, oh, we've started a bit slow here. These guys are really quick. We know that we finish games well, so we'll just try and be in range. And they did dial that in. You could see them being aware of that and going for it, and Spain's defence just held them out, repelled them, and 28-7 was just a much more insurmountable half-time scoreline than what they faced when they had a home game against Portugal, when they did manage to peg them back with that pre-half-time try and then come on strong in the end. It was just a little too late in the context of the first half, and in context arriving to the pitch, and ultimately in the game then 28-7 at half-time was an insurmountable lead.
It was, and the instinct obviously is to give credit to that wonderful Spanish offence that showed some sparkling ability, that classic offloading game that they bring, the speed
great
that they
running
bring,
lines, depth and deception.
All of that was great, but their hidden weapon in this game was the defence, shutting things down and
that,
really
unsettling.
I think
that's born of the same
offense.
Thing as the carry game. It was just they were ferocious because they knew how much it mattered, and they were bringing that intensity from the opening bell, and Romania were shocked.
But well coached as well. Like they understood what Romania were going to bring. Romania were going to bring off set pieces and off first phase. If it's off lineouts, they're going to be tough at the maul. They're going to try and maul you, and then they're going to try and hit you up in midfield. And their wingers will get the ball off the end of their moves. They're not going to go. They're not going to bust it up using the wings off first or second phase or even third phase. A lot of the time, they're going to let Vavasa and their power runners do most of that work. And Jimeno and the Spanish defense managed to shut that down so well. Like that little set where he got the pick for 28-7 was a classic example. And Romania, probably an indication of just not enough subtlety in what they're doing, where they just all took it flat to the line. There was a 10, 12, 13 all running flat to the line, so he could hit the short runner, he could hit the wide runner. Neither were great options because Spain came out and shut it down. He tries to find Vavasa for something play that isn't there, and Jimeno just sees it, picks it off. Classy play from him.
Really good defence.
But they were organised. They knew what to expect, and they caught Romania cold on a couple of occasions. And Romania were unsettled because of it. I think the very dangerous winner, Simeonescu, who
did produce a worldie of a moment.
He did, but in the first half, he had another opportunity to do it. Burst down the wing, and he could have fed Sergiu on his inside to run in for a try, but actually didn't. And then Spain, he got tackled and went into touch, but he popped the ball back in, and it was we were unsure as to whether or not it went into touch, and Spain went and ran in what would have been another try for 33-7. But actually that wasn't for Romania's point of view. Thankfully it saved their blushes, and that one wasn't a 14-point swing, and it was just the 28-7. But that was obviously just huge. An indication that Romania were unsettled, and they couldn't. They weren't quite themselves. They weren't able to think on their feet.
It was feeling like game over at half time, and then it was feeling more so with just the way the third quarter played out as well, because Spain were really good there too. They came out of the sheds still with that purpose, and you could see that in every contact, every collision, that they were up for it, and that they were a little bit more dialed and more just accurate in everything that they were doing than Romania.
They probably had about 5 or 6 goal line stands.
They did
at the start of that second half, as Romania really wanted to get over the line.
Because they really wanted that score before half time. They knew that they needed to get it quickly. You could see that urgency from them, and Spain knew what to expect from them, both in terms of how the play was going to go, but also just in terms of they were going to throw the kitchen sink at them. There was do or die at that moment, and fair play to the Spaniards. Whatever was said at half time, it was a really good response. It involved really good defensive sets back to back to deny them that ability to get back in, and then being able to flip on a dime when the opportunity does present itself, and then go in and grab crucial scores that they did throughout this game.
And the other thing is just the sheer physicality of their forward pack. I mean, both starting locks had huge plays shutting down Romanian mauls. Mora and Guillaume. They both looked well able for the physical battle. Wily. It's probably a point of difference between themselves and Portugal, the quality of that tight five.
It is.
And then a guy like Futu, I don't quite know how to pronounce the name, Thierry Futu, who came on off the bench, and he's Cameroonian born. Interesting backstory as a prop wearing 16, but he came on and was just an absolute wrecking ball.
So good. There he is up there. He was an absolute monster in that second half. He was skittling Romanians
so much
fun.
For that Romanian second half physicality. He just came off the bench and was explosive and was dynamic and was everywhere.
Was brilliant.
That physicality in the tight five was one of the real shocks of the game from Spain, that they were it wasn't just against Romania or against Russia and the Netherlands that these guys are for real, and that if they can tighten up their discipline, they are going to be a ferocious team to deal with, because the marriage of the skill and speed that they have out wide, and the quality of things like their kicking game.
Kicking is all very good. I was going to say,
if they can marry that with the physicality of the forward pack, they're going to be a formidable force. And they looked it in this game. This was it coming together.
This was could have been a coming of age showing as well. Quercy managed to grab the next, or was it their last score ultimately, but they grabbed a couple of tries post half time that really put the game beyond doubt. It was 38-7 was actually the gap at one point. Such was the dominance of Spain, and such was the calibre of this performance before Romania did have what they do have in their locker, which is a really good, not even last quarter, but last 10 to 15 minutes. They really do come on strong at the end of these games in these tier 2 matchups, and that's been a consistent trend. Obviously Georgia notwithstanding, and they do still have to play Georgia. It'll remain to be seen whether they can manage that, but they still managed to grab scores, albeit Spain had rung the changes and they knew the game was won at this point. But the way Romania finish games is still a lot to their credit, and they can take something away from Madrid with just the way that they finish, because 38-7 is a very, very tough one to take, but they did grab a couple of tries and pad the score to 38-21. Nearly managed to grab another as well to go all the way back for three.
Yeah, but you've got to give credit to Spain as well. After those 2 tries went in, and one of them was a sublime score from Simeonescu.
Yes, that was a complete solo, just a bit of magic.
It was the first phase that actually worked well for them, just feeding him as first receiver and watching him go to work.
Actually stuck. They got their spacing right, and then away he went. That was one, and actually the other was pretty as well, because Vavasa does cut a lovely line as well, and he did again to go in. Yeah,
and that was particularly impressive because he was playing through some pain at that point. I hope he was okay, but he was down. He was holding himself. He'd taken some bad bad knocks, and then he managed to get up and cut a lovely line and get that score, that defiant score. He'd actually had some really lovely touches in the first half after being outplayed.
Very fine player still, but it was a bit of a lesson, or just it was just a bit of a humbling from the Spaniards, and it was their first away game. So it was a good one, and actually the credit to the Spanish crowd. That little stadium, the UCM in Madrid, was brilliant, and it was full pretty much, and there was a good noise, there was a raucous atmosphere, and why not? Because the sun was shining, and their players, their team were playing some fantastic footy out there in Madrid, and credit to Spain. They kind of grabbed that by the scruff of the neck and put themselves in a great position.
They did, no question. They were the better team on the day. They raised the bar again in this constantly evolving and brilliant championship. Yeah. And they're on course for a slam this year. They've got 2 games left. They got to play Portugal and Georgia, and that's going to be huge for them. They'll hope they're not done winning games. Obviously, the game against Portugal is huge, and they'll fancy it against Georgia.
They're quite a little win streak into these last 2 rounds.
They have to tidy up the probably the biggest win streak in Tier 2.
I would say so.
Especially after Georgia had that slip up at home to Portugal in the drawn game. They obviously they have to tidy up the discipline a little bit. Like the fact that it doesn't take too much pressure in the red zone to cause them to give up a yellow card. True. That's a problem. They're still averaging 1 or 2 a game. I promise you that Georgia would make that count against them. So they have to be
Portugal
careful.
Might even as well.
But overall, the quality of player that they have, they seem really well coached. They seem determined. They're coming to life. They were down and out last year. They're riding some momentum wave, and they look brilliant at the moment. It was Portugal who looked brilliant, and then Romania do them, and then Romania are looking brilliant. Now here comes Spain. Hopefully they don't come unstuck themselves, but it's definitely just been fascinating and high quality and enthralling this championship this year. It really has.
It teases it up very, very nicely. As you say, Los Leones still on for the slam. Romania still not out of this comp or the World Cup reckoning at all. It was obviously a setback, but they were in pole position before that round, so they still had some points to spare. So
it was a chance to near enough ice it. Now it's thrown it back into chaos.
Right back into the mix again. But credit to Spain, full credit to Spain for the fantastic win for them at home. And I actually think that last Romanian defiant try might have removed the bonus point from them. So it did. 3 points. So that is some good pedigree, and that makes that Vauvasa score important. So all very much in the melting pot.
They do have the Romanians as well. They do have Georgia to play. They also have the Netherlands to play. Indeed. So that is definitely a cushion for them to go back to. They do. Everyone
Spain
else is done playing the Netherlands now. They have to play the Netherlands,
and they might know exactly what they need out of it before going in, which is a useful
their last game. So I think Romania are still in a great position to qualify, to get that automatic qualification spot. Obviously, depending on whether or not Spain just run the table like they look like doing. But yes, there was supposed to be one other game this week. Georgia were scheduled obviously to take on Russia, and indeed this did not go ahead, lest there be riots in Tbilisi. I'm not sure that the Russian players would have got out alive. But obviously, along with most, if not all, sporting bodies in the world Rugby has confirmed sanctions for Russia and indeed Belarus, the suspension of both teams from international and cross-border rugby, the suspension of Russia from World Rugby membership entirely.
So they're removed from the rugby rankings, for instance.
Gone. All their unions, men's teams, women's teams, they were due to host events for Rugby Europe. Their teams, NSISTM and Lokomotiv Moscow in the Super Cup, gone. Their own rugby league no longer sanctioned. All of it, they won't have access to any referees. They can do all that themselves if they want to play their own league. And they were saying obviously that this is effective immediately, and this decision, according to World Rugby, has been taken with the interest of rugby's values of solidarity, integrity and respect at heart. They also remain in contact with colleagues at the Ukraine Rugby Federation, and they've pledged their full support to the rugby community in the country, whatever that means. It's tough to be anything. I mean, for me, this is like, I obviously you hate when world events impact the game we love, but I mean this is the right decision. What's going on is just beyond egregious. It's disgusting. It's really depressing to see a nation invade like this. Sport is supposed to replace the war games of madmen. As this is supposed to be how we deal with our tribalism, and and stupidity in some ways, and a way to channel it into something positive, and not channel it into just idiotic murder and disgusting behaviour that the Russians government, I should say, but the Russian government and army are doing at the moment. But yes, I think it's the right decision. It's a no-brainer.
Absolutely.
And so that game didn't go ahead. The Georgians didn't obviously play last week, and that's obviously a shame. We always like to see the Georgians.
It's true.
But that has left anyway the table in this position.
Yeah, which and also thrown that other spanner in the works. This is the table as it stands for this year's tournament, with Spain sitting pretty atop with 13, Romania 8 in second, and then Georgia on 7, Portugal also on 7, and then Russia on 1, with Netherlands bringing up the rear on 0. But the interesting thing and the
we
dynamic...
should probably move on and look at the World Cup table.
The other one is the World Cup table, which is the more important one, let's be real. But Georgia on top of that with 31 points, then Spain with 25, courtesy of that brilliant win. Romania on 22. Those are, as it stands, the 3 going to the World Cup. Portugal 1 outside of it on 21, still in the hunt, and then Russia down on 10 points, and the Netherlands again on 0 on both tables.
Yeah,
but
so
this does raise the
Portugal
question.
looking on the outside, from the outside looking in, 4 points off Spain and 1 point off Romania. You might remember,
and only one game left to play because they were to play Russia.
Well, this is it. This is the thing, as you were saying. I think you were getting to the Russian question now that the Russians are out of it has created some logistical problems for this whole qualification process. Yeah, some teams, Portugal included, still had left to play the Russians, and so I guess they were in this position where either they just award 28-0 bonus point wins to everyone playing Russia
henceforth, which would be 3 28-0s into
did
that
Russia
mix.
play the Netherlands yet this year?
No.
Well,
so a 28-0 win for
the Netherlands over Russia, but they could do that,
it
or
would be Georgia and Portugal who would be the beneficiaries of 28-0 windfalls if they were to opt for that decision.
Indeed,
the other option is to just scrub all the Russia results so far, so remove the wins that have happened thus far in this tournament, as well as not count any of the other scores.
There was reports in Spain as well that apparently there's something in the rules which says that is what you do in event of a team being sanctioned out of a competition, which obviously I think they were thinking more ineligible players than committing war crimes. Someone has put together the what the table would look like if that was how they would go for it. So it would change the table completely. It would be all teams have, Georgia would have 6 games played, and they would have 25 points. Romania, obviously 6 games played themselves, 17 points, so 8 back, so Georgia actually more or less safe. Then Portugal with 17 as well, tied with Romania, but with 7 games played. They just have Spain left, and then Spain would be a further point behind with 6 games played. But obviously they would be in a situation where they still have to play Georgia and then have that all important game against Portugal. So it's slightly changed. Obviously now Spain are on the outside looking in from being in a situation where they were second, which obviously doesn't look too good. But of course they have the extra game on Portugal, which is against Georgia, and they'll hope to get at least a point, I suppose, out of that. To try and level it up. But practically speaking, what we're looking at here is Romania are going to get this bonus, whatever happens between Romania and Georgia. They might, they were talking after that game, they were talking big about we still think we can beat Georgia and we're still in this competition.
Don't sleep on Spain with all that talk.
No, indeed. But no, they were talking after the Spanish game. After they took that defeat, they were still saying that. But that'll be obviously a huge titanic clash in the next round. But if Georgia, as expected, come away with the win in that game, Romania will still have a game against the Dutch, which they'll rack up 5 points and will likely see them still hold on to second, unless Spain go and beat Georgia and Portugal. But then the other game, the huge game, is going to be Spain-Portugal. That's on the last weekend.
The Iberian derby on the last weekend. That's going to decide everything. Perhaps it could be for a repechage. It looks right now. It feels like the dynamic is that will probably be a shootout for the repechage.
Yeah, and we'll see whether teams can get anything out of the Georgia game. Spain and Romania both have a cut at Georgia.
Indeed, and that will change. If they can, then that will change the dynamic entirely. And sure, Portugal managed to draw in Tbilisi, so it is not impossible by any stretch that happens. But at the minute, the dynamics are shifting and are a bit volatile, and obviously a Russian spanner thrown in the works that does change what the dynamic is. There is the gap week now, so they do have some time to decide this, but it would be...
They said they'll announce it. They did say they'll announce it in the coming days. They put it at the bottom of their statement that they were banning Russia, and they were saying, like, listen, we'll make clear in the near future what this means
before any of you play your next round. You'll know what the situation
have to consult with World Rugby as well, Rugby Europe, just to make, because obviously the World Cup qualifier is what's important.
Yeah,
so they have to consult with World Rugby, and together they'll set those rules and make an announcement in due course, which we'll have for you hopefully in time for the previews.
Well, next week. Hopefully next week when we're previewing the shows, we'll have a clearer idea as to what the picture is. But we do have an idea of what the picture will be. But it does throw that little spanner into the works. But otherwise, a very good weekend for Spain, a decent weekend for Portugal, and the World Cup qualifier is just still very, very much alive, and it does look like it's going to go down to the last weekend, regardless of what the decision is. It's just going to go down to that final play in Madrid, perhaps.
Yeah, well, we've got at least 3 more just humdinger games coming up. We've got Georgia, Romania, Georgia, Spain, and Spain, Portugal.
Awesome games.
That they're just mouth-watering clashes that are still to come, and plenty of intrigue there. And we'll have all those previews for you on next week's show. But for now, we are going to park that. We are going to park Rugby Europe and move on. Yeah. That is the bulk of the show. Those are the 2 big international tournaments taking place. But there were other World Cup permutations going on last weekend as well, as the Women's World Cup finally got its 12 teams.
Yes, the 2021 Women's World Cup finally has all the teams that will compete in it finalised. Out in Dubai in the Sevens Stadium out there, Scotland were playing Colombia for the right to go to the big show, and it was Scotland who came out quite comprehensively on top. I think 59-3 in the end. It was kind of, well, I was going to say men v boys, but women v girls, I guess, was the adage. It was just the Six Nations intensity that Scotland are more used to operating at was far too much for the Colombians, who do run a nice line here and there, but they weren't able.
They played like 4 international tests in their history.
Indeed,
it was crazy.
No, credit to them for making it as far as they did, and I'm sure they'll take a lot from the experience of it. And they played a great game against Kazakhstan last week as well, so credit to them for that. But no, it is Scotland who have triumphed overall, and it is the right result. They earned it in that European knife fight that our own charges fell in, but the Spanish were involved in, and the Italians, and there were all 4 decent teams that could have had a cut at it, and Scotland earned the right with a good win against Ireland to go to Dubai, and they have now grabbed that opportunity with both hands, and it's the first time in 12 years that they're going to be a part of the World Cup, so credit to them. That's going to be huge for women's rugby in Scotland.
Good to see there was some good news in Scottish rugby.
Indeed, on a weekend,
on a dark weekend.
On a pretty dark weekend, that's true. Yeah, no, it was very good. They'll join Pool A, so they will face, I think, New Zealand, Wales and Australia in that pool. So I won't. They
got the Wales last year were one of the worst teams in the Six Nations, so they'll definitely fancy that. New Zealand and Australia, obviously the Black Ferns, forget about them. They beat Wales and then have a cut at those Aussies and see what happens.
Yeah, indeed.
That's the Scottish mission.
Indeed, yeah. But it's already mission accomplished so far. But that does mean that the 12 teams are now finalised. We do have a World Cup that will be taking place. It remains to be seen whether there'll be crowds there. It is obviously New Zealand, but it's later in the year. Hopefully we'll see some crowds and some festive atmosphere for the World Cup. But credit to Scotland. They played a good game. They played what was in front of them, ran in some nice tries, 59 points. Can't really be mad. And credit to Colombia as well. Well done making it that far. But
and we would be remiss of us also not to mention the under-20s, where Ireland continue their charge for a Grand Slam, the only Slam winners left in it. They had a nice 39-12 win over Italy. They were the better team in that game. Italy probably, again, were pretty harshly penalised by the ref in that game. It was definitely felt like they were on the harsh side of the whistle in that game, as much as they lost their discipline in moments. But Ireland did very well to see that one home. Great win in Dublin. France kind of predictably beat Scotland. Scotland put up a fight, but they were 18-3 up at half time and ended up winning it 30-17. Good win for the French. England, of course, blasting through Wales 43-14. Not too surprising. Avenging the 6-0 nonsense.
Yes,
with
43 points to back up. Yes, the nil that was very ignominious out in Italy, but back in winning ways, and that leaves Ireland obviously on top of the table with, I think, 14 points from
That's
a possible
right, yeah.
15. And then England in second with 11. Just behind them is France, also on 11, but on points difference they're just behind. And then a bit of a gap down to 5 for Wales, 4 for Scotland, and 4 for Italy, I should say, and 1 for Scotland. Italy obviously did a nice 6-0 win. That's going to be good for 4 points. And Scotland do seem to be struggling with the intensity. They're always quite a small team at under 20 level. Scotland. They just look physically like they get blown away a bit too often.
Yeah, they were in that game against France in moments, so they won't be too worried about it. But Ireland hunting down that Grand Slam 2 games away.
And to be fair to that Ireland team, they play a nice brand. They try and run the ball very well, and they dug it out in France with that late try, and it could yet be the making of the tournament for them, because they're playing really, really well since then, and that's the kind of stuff that tournaments swing on.
Yeah, good test for them going out to play England away next game. That's just a good test for the young lads. Try and repeat the feat.
Yes, indeed, big away wins. They're in short supply, and they're very, very valuable when you can get them. But we're gonna go, come on Ireland for that one. Obviously we're no Grand Slam in the big show, but in the under 20s, let's get that slam. Let's go young lads. A great tournament obviously.
But yes, we're going to park all of international rugby now and do a quick wrap up of club footy before we wrap up the show. Starting in Europe, where the top couture has continued to rumble on, and it was mostly home wins. One away win for La Rochelle over Pau last weekend. La
Rochelle doing well, finding themselves a bit of form at a time that they do need it, because they're right on the outskirts in terms of the lay of the land, so they're managing to eke out some wins, which is good for Ronan O'Gara.
Absolutely. Every other game went to the home team. Lyon blew out Biarritz 34-15. Racing blew out Cast 45-25. Clermont put 52 on Perpignan. Brive managed to see off Toulon in a great game. 5 Fijians on the field at one point for Brive, who are very much big tier 2 reps.
They are.
And it was just a fun game to see them beat Toulon and then kick a late kick to push them out from the losing bonus, which is just 5.
That's only 5 in the top tour, so a 7-point win, 17-10. The other big story, biggish story, was the 12-11 win for Toulouse. They managed to not avoid the 6 in a row ignominy of that. They had done 5 losses in a row, but they weren't going to suffer another home defeat. About managed to squeak home against the league leaders, and the league leaders now go 0-3 on the bounce. A 3-game losing streak for Bordeaux is tightened everything. Illustrates just how competitive this league is. Like the 2 finalists, in terms of just where the league table is at, the 2 finalists from last year are currently sitting in 6th, which is Toulouse, and 7th La Rochelle, who are currently out of the barrage spots as it stands, despite the win at the weekend. A combined form guide of 3 and 7 in terms of their last 10 games, last 5 each between Toulouse and La Rochelle. Foreign teams in the competition, very much Racing and also Montpellier, who are just one off the top now, and they have a game in hand, so they could take the top with that game in hand. They have a 30-3 win over the quite impressive Quesada Stade Francais. I didn't see that game, but I'm curious to know what happened there. That's big blowout win at home over Stade. Very impressive. Montpellier showing their potential championship credentials, which is something European teams have to worry about as well, given that they will be in still Europe. In the mix, courtesy of a few points from us, but Montpellier definitely a serious team as well. This weekend then we have another few fixtures. This is round 20 of 26, so we're getting into that business end now where it's do or die if you want to get in or out. Cast will be hosting Montpellier in the first game. That's at 2 o'clock on Saturday. Then the 4 o'clock kickoffs, of which there are several. Biarritz are playing Toulon, Bordeaux are hosting Pau, La Rochelle are playing Brive, and Perpignan are playing Racing 92. That could be an away win in that one, but those are the 4 o'clock kickoffs. And then the prime time on Saturday evening, Clermont v Lyon. That should be a bit of a game. Clermont coming off the back of a nice 50-point win at the weekend. They racked up a score, and Lyon looking decent as well, well in the mix. And then on Sunday, Stade Francais host Toulouse at prime time as well. That's 8:05. That's the only Sunday game, and that could be a bit of a humdinger. Could be a good game. Stade obviously reeling from that bad defeat, but still a very fine team and very good at home. True. Then in the URC, we had a few games. The South African teams came up north. That was the dynamic of the weekend. They came to play, so they did. They did the Italian job, but not the Irish job. They did. Yes, the Sharks and the Bulls both managed good wins in Italy. The Sharks 29-7 over Benetton. Obviously, Benetton without those Italian internationals. But and still the Bulls, a more competent team than the Zebra, who offered 7 to the Bulls 45. Yes, which is about maybe the spread.
Indeed. Leinster played the Lions, and I was at that game in the RDS, and I got to tell you, the Lions were very good.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know that they're sitting near the bottom, and their form guide suggest like they're 5-8 losses in the row, they're 2-8 on the season, but their scrum was good.
Their scrum was excellent.
Like, their kicking game is definitely good.
They tackled hard. They played with a bit of dynamism. They pushed Leinster all the way, and Leinster did well. Like, it was a solid win for Leinster up against some
no
good
bonus
pressure.
But didn't really deserve it on balance. Looking at it was a tighter game than all that, and credit to the Lions for making it so, to be honest. Got to tip your hat. But the game of the weekend was probably Connacht hosting the Stormers.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
What a good clash of styles it was. Kitsoff did monster a few of those scrums, but Connacht got a few bits off, lovely offloading and interplay for the daily score that got them back into it, because the Stormers were starting to squeeze them, but a bit of Connacht magic out in the sports grounds, and it was a 10-point deficit that they overcame, which is a nice reversal of some of the things they've been doing by throwing away 10-point leads and such.
And it would consequence as well if the Stormers were probably just trying to slow everything up a bit, and then
too much.
By the end, Connacht took the lead with 10 to go, and all of a sudden they were running to take a kick off, and it definitely unsettled them. And probably a little bit of inexperience away from home from the Stormers. It's been so long since these teams have consistently had to travel abroad to play games,
indeed.
And it is a different dynamic. I am looking forward to the teams coming back to South Africa.
I think in April I think there are a few fixtures lined up in South Africa, but touch wood, they go ahead. The last time we had games slated in South Africa, the teams got all the way to South Africa before a COVID scare, and they bailed out on it. So I do, before the regular season's out, it would be nice if we got a few good fixtures out in South Africa for a few of these teams, just to get a lay of the land as well.
Yeah, no question. Leinster still hold on to their place at the top of the table, just over Ulster. Glasgow are in third, then Munster in fourth, Edinburgh fifth. After they were looking so promising at top of the table, they've dipped a bit. Connacht do off the back of that win happily in sixth, Osprey seventh, and the Sharks enter the playoff places for the first time in eighth, with the Stormers just behind them in ninth and the Bulls behind them in 10th. So those Safa sides are coming for the playoffs, creeping
up for those playoffs, and it's all kind of shadow boxing before then. But you got to get yourself into that top 8 to get into the playoff area, and some of those Safa teams will definitely be fancying it. Full weekend of fixtures now. This weekend it was only the 4 rescheduled games last weekend, but this weekend we have on Friday Edinburgh hosting Connacht and Ulster hosting Cardiff. Both kick off at 7:35 on Friday. Then on Saturday, Benetton hosting Leinster, kick off 12:55, quite an early kick off. Then Munster hosting Dragons, that one is 5:15, and Scarlets play Glasgow, kicking off at the same time. Probably Scarlets Glasgow is the game to watch of those two, I would say. But Sunday, March 6th, then you have Ospreys versus Zebra. So it's the full week 13, but the Safa teams get a break this time, which is nice.
Well, they have plenty of breaks. The problem is they can't play each other.
They can't play each other.
Surely
no more Safa derbies. Ordinarily you would chuck in a few Safa derbies in this particular
think you'll
window.
find it's time for the Curry Cup.
Curry Cup could start spontaneously over the course of the weekend.
They do just break out on occasion, the Curry Cups. But yes, that wraps up the URC. Still looking forward to the games in South Africa whenever they come about.
True.
In the Premiership, obviously, the dynamics of the test window are very much colouring what's going on here.
It's true. Some of the big teams struggling without their big assets somewhat.
That's right. But Quins did manage an away win over Worcester 29-21.
Yeah.
Sale Sharks and London Irish played out a 27-all draw.
Bit of a humdinger there.
Bristol got a win against Wasps, a much needed win for Pat Lamb's troops. Leicester beat Gloucester 35-23. They're not having any issues.
No, they are not. They're looking very good.
Glory. And Bath got an away win in Newcastle 30-25. And to be fair, it has been coming for Bath. They've been playing better, and
they have. And it's good to see them scoring 30 points and getting a win on the board away from home. Fair play to them. The other game was an away win. Exeter on the Sunday managed to sneak a win over Northampton.
That was hilarious because I wasn't able to, obviously things were we're watching a million games on Sunday between Spain and Ireland.
Yeah.
I stepped in on that game and it was 31-17 or something
with a few minutes left.
About 15 minutes left, and I was like, oh, well done Northampton.
Yeah.
And I walked out and I had to go do something, and then I came back in for what felt like 5 minutes later, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
They blew it from there?
They
How?
did. Well, a yellow card followed by a try, followed by another try was kind of the way they did it.
That's how it went, yeah. That's how it goes.
So credit to Exeter, they have the clutch to dial it out, and Northampton, dear oh dear, Fortress Franklin's Gardens, it really ain't. And yeah, they managed to cough up that really good winning position. So that leaves the league table looking quite interesting. Leicester still sitting pretty atop with 70 points, is that right? They've scored 70
points. They can pretty much sit out the rest of the season and still host a semi-final.
Indeed, they are in mighty place. You have to go all the way down to 54 to find Saracens. And Saracens are playing a good season for that. So yeah, credit to Leicester, they've looked impeccable so far. Harlequins then on 53 and Exeter Chiefs on 50. That makes up the current top 4 and playoff position. But London Irish in 5th, sniffing around with some good results under their belt. Gloucester just won back from them on 47, and then Sale also won back from them. A few teams that are playing some decent footy.
Sale the form side in the competition.
They are.
They're unbeaten in 5, 4 wins, and just that draw on the weekend.
Yeah, so looking really good. Wasps 43 and Northampton Saints 42. Still in the hunt-ish, but definitely leaving it a little late because there are only 6 regular season games.
It's not happening for them.
It's probably a bit too far back. And then further back still, Bristol. Yeah, a pretty disappointing season, it has to be said, from Bristol, who find themselves in 10th position on the table. Newcastle Falcons then follow them, and Worcester Warriors and Bath still propping up the bottom of the table, despite having a few more wins more recently and looking a little bit tidier towards the tail end of the season.
But they can all breathe easy because Premiership did announce today that the 2 teams atop the Championship don't have a sufficient stadium to be considered for the Premiership, apparently.
So
apparently they're setting the cap for a team that can play in the Premiership at a 10,000 capacity Cedar Stadium. So Connacht wouldn't be allowed to play in the Premiership.
Bizarre.
Yeah, pretty bizarre, alright. Anyway, there's a few games this week going on in the Premiership as well.
That's right.
We've got Quins against Falcons on the Friday evening. Then on Saturday you've got Bath hosting Bristol. Saracens play Leicester in the game of the weekend at 3 o'clock on Saturday.
That's one to watch.
Gloucester play Northampton, and London Irish host Worcester. And then on the Sunday you've got Exeter Sale, which is another juicy fixture.
That's another good game. Defences could be on top for that one, but a bye for Wasps this weekend, so no game for them. But some good fixtures, definitely. If you're going to watch one, I'd say Sarries Tigers top of the table clash. Except no other
juicy one.
But yeah, with that we are going to move on from Europe, because there are other places in the world where rugby happens, and we're going to start in America, where Major League Rugby had round 4 play out, and there were a few good results. Toronto managed to get an away win, get their season up and running with a 29-5 win over Old Glory DC,
who are emerging themselves as perhaps even worse than the Dallas Jackals, the new team. They might be the worst team out there.
Struggling out there are Old Glory for sure. Seattle Seawolves, your horse in this race, did suffer a home setback, so they did 25.
How many horses do I get? I thought it was on Nola's team.
You were, in terms of who you were tipping your cap to maybe get the win overall, just in terms of a prediction more than support.
They could still do it.
They could still do it, but they did suffer a setback at the hands of the Austin Gilgronis, 25-18 in Seattle. That was a good result. And then Dallas Jackals, in their second ever home game, scored 5 points, but did concede 41 to Rugby New York, who are still unbeaten in the competition this year and looking very good. Then Houston Sabercats scored 20 themselves at home, but San Diego Legion racked up 31 and took that win away from them. Very good showing from San Diego. And then a bit of a humdinger. It was a tighter one than you would have expected with the score lines coming up to it, but LA Giltinis 19, New England Free Jacks 15. High quality game. Those are 2 decent teams that could well be in the business end of this tournament.
Big win for LA as well. Sets their season going
definitely
in good stead. So that was the dynamic. Austin Gilgronis with the big win, the only unbeaten team left in the competition. New York.
New York have yet to be beaten.
One of their games.
Yes, they're 3 from 3, but still unbeaten. So fair play to the new branded Rugby New York.
Yeah, and a few games this week. Seattle playing NOLA, Utah playing Dallas Jackals, Rugby ATL hosting the Houston Sabercats. The Austin Gilgronis against LA Giltinis will be the game of the weekend, along with New York against New England. Those are two great games on Sunday evening. And then San Diego hosting Old Glory, and will probably be a blowout for Man on his troops.
A bit of blood sport to round out the weekend in Major League Rugby. But I think those two Sunday games, you're right to point out, Austin Gilgronis v LA Giltinis and Rugby New York v New England Free Jacks. Bit of New York v New England dynamic. I'd be curious to the crowd in that one. But those are all available on the Rugby Network, and they're all available free. And if you're going to watch one, I'd say
it's good. It's good coverage. They're good fun, good rugby. Definitely worth a watch. There was also some action in Japan, in Japan League One. The big game of the weekend really was the Wild Knights beating Suntory Sunderland.
Suntory who look imperious in all of their other matchups, but they can't quite seem to crack those Wild Knights. Nope. That was a repeat of last year's final, and the champs triumphed again over Suntory. DMAC not enough to save them, so 34-17, that was the result of the weekend. There were other results. Obviously, the Shizuoka Blue Revs managed to get the win away from home against the Green Rockets, 34-27. Bit of a game, that one too. Kobelco Steelers and Red Hurricanes was actually postponed. That didn't go ahead this weekend. But Shining Arcs, who sometimes struggle, but they played out a really tight game with the Brave Lupus and edged it by a point, 22-21. Then in the other game, Kubota Spears really pumped the Verblitz, 41-20. And then the final game of the weekend, Cannon Eagles away from home managed 30 points to the Black Rams 12. And it's emerging already on the table that there are a few contenders and there are a few that are definitely struggling. On top of it are actually the Kubota Spears, who have yet to, or they suffered one defeat so far, but they're on 25 points, which is a very good showing. Suntory in second on 23, Wild Knights on 22. No unbeaten teams left in the comp, which is probably a good sign. I know Suntory have gone deep into the comp unbeaten before, but good that there are some scalps being taken. But that top four, they're Wild Knights in third and Cannon Eagles in fourth. They're on 22 points, 23 points, 25 points. Then it's the Verblitz down on 18 points, and the Verblitz did just get pumped by the Kubota Spears. So it's already starting to look like those four in the playoff position up top are nearly set in stone. And then they can all play good games against each other, but down at the lower end of the table, like the Red Hurricanes are really struggling with the intensity. And there is promotion relegation this year, so it'll be interesting to see what comes up from below. But there's definitely a little bit of a gulf between the top level.
As we say, it's kind of still a bit basketball out in Japan, and a few games this weekend as well to be played too. Suntory hosting the Kobelco Steelers, Hurricanes hosting the Knights, the Wild Knights, Kubota Spears placing the Shizuoka Blue Revs, Verblitz hosting the Shining Arcs, Brave Lupus hosting Canning Eagles, and Black Rams hosting the Green Rockets. So I
actually think Black Rams v Green Rockets, although a lower level clash, might be the more competitive of the games, because looking at those matchups, it looks like there could be some blood sport in the offing this round.
It often is. But that is the Japanese League One. We're also going to take a look now at Super Rugby, which is really what piques my interest, if I'm being honest.
True.
Then there were some great games on the weekend. There were. It is starting to live up to the billing. The opening game, obviously, Highlanders against Crusaders,
the Southern Derby.
I mean, it was a phenomenal start from the Highlanders. They took a 13-0 lead. Aaron Smith there was a beautiful Tony Brown set piece move with a disguised blindside winger cutting through in front of
just to catch the Crusaders. I love it.
They
always put in some great showings against the Crusaders in this Southern Derby, the Landers, and that was a great try.
Indeed. And I mean, they were all over them, but the Crusaders were able to respond very quickly and very classily through
their class is never in doubt, really, and their temperament, collective temperament, is probably the most impressive. Well, one of the more impressive aspects of their, they have many impressive qualities, but just their ability not to panic when they're hit with a team like the Landers starting really, really well, starting with a fire, and just their ability to ease back into the contest, and then their bit of kind of magic that they have in Sevu Rees being as dialed as he was. Really good sequence of play that led to his try, but it was kind of sparked by him grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck as well and coming back into it. But then good to see the tap and go try rewarded as well, unlike in the Six Nations.
Absolutely, and it was a brilliant performance from the Highlanders for the most part. Just a few crucial sequences, like when Fakatava came on, moving the ball really well, nearly finding Mitch Hunt on a great complete it was about 10 phase sequence all the way from their half all the way to a beautiful try, and then Mitch Hunt had just been held up over the line on the finish, and it was a goal line dropout. They had a couple of sequences like that, a couple of nearly stories, but they had defended really well, and crucially they had contained and kind of beat up Will Jordan. They were ready for what he was doing on those pivots, on those trail runs. They had him marked, and they were eating him alive.
He was nowhere for most of the game, but then he was everywhere suddenly.
Exactly. In the crucial stage of the game, after the Highlanders blew 16.5 million chances in the second half, the Crusaders showed why they are the best team in this competition, because they don't blow those key chances. And just off a kick return, it was a lovely little ball from Fainga Nuku, and then the
afterburners.
They cut away. They end up breaking down the right wing, feed Will Jordan, and then he just beats about 6 or 7 players, dances his way to
dragging the last 2 over the line with him with the leg drive. It was a special score from him.
Special player, one of the form players.
It's one of those spot the All Black moments when you're watching some of these Super Rugby games and you're going like, geez, there's a lot of bloody good players out there. Who's that guy? Oh, that's the All Black out there.
Well, there was loads of All Blacks out there, but then there was an exceptional All Black in Will Jordan, and he backed that up then with a 50-22 that led to another score, and in the end it was a 15-point win, 34-19, despite being close. Because
they're so good at that, even in close games, no losing bonus point going, because your Crusaders will finish strong. And a bit of sympathy has to go out for the Highlanders, who played a really good game. Watching them try to attack is still very frustrating, because Aaron Smith's a genius, and their backup halfback Fakatava is a good player as well, but it's just the options off them are not quite there.
It was a little better in this game, but it takes a lot of phase play. It takes
a lot of work for them to get their scores.
But they have the odd first phase strike move, which they did have in this game, is definitely something they need to be competitive. But yes, that was that game. There were also some other very competitive games going on.
Good to see the Waratahs have arrived to the pitch. We were worried about that blowout in week 1, thinking like, is it just that the Drew are that bad, or the Waratahs actually a serious team this year, which they weren't last year. But they gave the Reds a right rattle, and they do look much better this year.
It was a rainy, there's been flooding,
some deluge in the Aussie games. I've never seen Aussie games
flooding.
So wet.
There's major flooding in Brisbane. The Reds have been completely disrupted. They had to train in a gym in a school, I believe. But you could see that in this game.
The Reds have been wholly disrupted because they had COVID pre-tournament, and now here they are in the typhoon trouble.
Tupou pulled out of this game in the warm-up, and so they were without him. And it did end up being like, it has that sort of state of origin, New South Wales v Queensland. That was how they built it, and it was a tight, tense, tough battle, with the Reds edging it by getting a crucial score towards the end, despite some good defence from the Waratahs throughout. The Reds did find the tries and found a way to win, and they showed their class. But the Taz, as you were to point out, very, very competitive. The Brumbies blew out the Druo. Unfortunately, the Druo not going to be able to handle some of these Aussie teams. 42-3, and then the game of the weekend. Holy moly! The Hurricanes, from down and out, from battered on 70 minutes, find 3 tries in the last 10 minutes.
We were ragging on Northampton up in the Northern Hemisphere, but geez,
the Blues.
How do you lose from there? I'm sure they don't quite know themselves. But to be fair to the Hurricanes, they did that in week 1 as well. Their final quarter was immaculate in week 1 as well. They look like a team that are fit in the opening 2 weeks.
Clutch, but they find that try, that last try as well, when the Blues were trying to defend them, and then the little disguised ball that cut the line open, and then Artie Savia down the touchline. Was he ever going to be stopped?
No, he wasn't. Not in those Hurricanes colours. He is just an absolute force. He's out there. Everywhere. Like in the last few minutes, you just can't handle him. You're all leggy. But 33-32. What a humdinger of a New Zealand game. This is what we loved about, like, even the Super Rugby Aotearoa was dishing up kind of contests like this, and it was great. A bit of a shock for the Blues. That was their first game of the season, with their first weekend being postponed
off,
but they had almost got it sewn up. They'd done great for most of it. It was a great performance.
The very Scottish Blues, in the same way that they feel like they could be the best team in New Zealand, but then they get in their own way.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, that is kind of what happened.
So you got to give all the credit to the Hurricanes and some blame to the Blues as well.
Of course,
but a real
give up a lead like that with 10 minutes
regardless
to go.
of who you're playing. You shouldn't be doing that.
Exactly right. But the result of the weekend, clearly.
The
Western Force pumping the Melbourne Rebels in Melbourne.
In a good game for justice.
28.
They were doing it for rugby, for justice, for all that's good in the world.
Well, I tell you what, they look good. The Western Force, they finally, last year they had to put their squad together. It was kind of their first season. They did get some old veterans. This year it's much more settled. Their team looks good, and hopefully themselves and the Taz are going to make for a much more competitive Wallaby conference.
Aussie conference, and then hopefully a better Wallabies as a result of it. But it's good to see those teams getting their act together. That being said, the Rebels as well. Like if I was slighting the Highlanders, that's a New Zealand team that I'm sliding for attacking from a New Zealand point of view. But like trying to watch the Rebels attack is no. The Rebels do seem down there. Like the Rebels seem like the team that the Drua and Pasifika might have a go at. Because it's such hard work there for their multi-phase. It's hard work.
They got Powell and Tamua at halfback.
It's true.
It's not good.
And Hodgett
It's not going to be competitive
out there.
Oh god, he had some bad plays in this game as well. But sure, listen, we won't linger on
it. But well done to the Western Force, and some good wins so far.
It looks good. It looks like it's going to be a great tournament this year. Obviously, with the caveat that we're going to have
disruptions. There will be disruptions.
Well, I mean, just we haven't had any inter-country games yet. No. It's all been domestic games, and obviously those look good
because of the disruptions, logistical disruptions behind the scenes, which have affected the warm-up. But sure, on the pitch, it's delivered so far.
No, it has. It's been great, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Aussie Kiwi games and hoping that the Aussies will keep it competitive. And those Kiwi teams do still look a little better, but like the Reds and the Brumbies, we hope are good, and to see the Taz and the Force compete with them in the opening weeks is very encouraging. So if we could have 4 competitive Aussie teams,
and hopefully can we get a Moana Pasifika game this weekend? It hasn't been called off just yet.
The Crusaders they're due to play.
I was going to say that this weekend the fixture's coming up: Moana Pasifika versus Crusaders. Which if you're going to have a baptism by fire in your first ever outing, why not try the Crusaders?
Go on, Moana Pasifika.
I know.
Do the world a favour. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Are there any non-Crusaders fans who wouldn't be up for Moana Pasifika at the opening whistle in that one, and then accepting after the first 5 minutes of what's going to happen?
Could you imagine the World Rugby, the axis of World Rugby would be turned on its head. So they host the Crusaders on Friday. Fiji and Drua host the Melbourne Rebels.
That's more interesting. And Fiji and Drua have been pumped in both games, but Rebels have managed to score very little in their opening 2 games.
Yes,
so
they too have been badly.
This is definitely their most competitive game so far. And the Western Force hosting. Well, I'm not sure if they're actually hosting because it's all they're playing the Queensland Reds. That's a bit of a game off the back of a bit of momentum to carry in, absolutely. And the Reds obviously a little bit stuttered for preparation themselves. They've had a torrid time between COVID and injury and now rain and all kinds of disruptions. So the Western Force will fancy a chance at going after the Aussie champs in that one. And then the Saturday games, you have the Blues v the Chiefs. Oh, there's the game already. But then there's also the Hurricanes Highlanders, which is also a bit of a game. And then the Brumbies v the Waratahs, which is a bit of an old school classic. And if the Taz are to be believed this year, this could be a very competitive Aussie derby as well.
I'm impressed with the Brumbies though. Impressed with the way they dug out the win against the Force in week 1. Impressed with the way they swatted off the Drua last week. And I would expect them to beat the Taz, despite the Taz showing some promise.
What about the Chiefs and the Blues? There's a game.
Yeah, I don't know about the Chiefs Blues. I think the Hurricanes will do for the Highlanders, but I'm not sure about the Blues and Chiefs. That'll be a good one, probably the game of the weekend.
Yeah, I would say so.
To watch there,
unless Fiji and Drua can get the win, or if Moana Pasifika can get the win, then that becomes the game of the season immediately.
For now,
but that is round 3, but that will roll on, and we'll keep you updated with all that as it does. But that does round off club rugby, and with that we're going to pivot on to the news of the week to round up the show, as we always do. And there's only a little bit of news this week off the field. Alan Wynne-Jones, good news for Welsh fans, music to Wales fans' ears, he has rejoined the squad this week in advance of that France game on the Friday night. He's rejoining the squad to finish his rehab. It is still expected that he's not going to be available for selection for the course of the Six Nations.
He's out for the Six Nations. I think he's just there as motivational Alan Wynne, and to try and teach his boys how to not get roughed up at line out time like that, because God knows he would never allow such a thing to happen.
That is true. In Twickenham of all places. So definitely just be. I don't even need to give why the pedigree is so good. They got him in because everyone in that dressing room hangs on his every word, and he's very clever.
Let him coach the lineouts like Paulie coaches Ireland's.
It's not a bad idea.
Pedigree. Then we have also in interesting news, Frank Lamani, who the Fijian international who had been playing for Northampton, he's been released by Northampton. He's going to join up with the Fijian Drua.
Love it.
Which is great because he actually burst onto the scene playing for the Drua in that Aussie competition when the Drua were in with the Western Force. That competition with like six points for a try and like 1 point for a penalty or a drop goal.
No, I thought it was -3 for taking a kick.
Exactly. But he burst onto the scene playing for the Drua, got picked up by Fiji, and then got picked up by Northampton.
He's become the Fiji halfback himself, and Vola forming that partnership.
Exactly. So now he's going to go back and play for the Drua, where he burst onto the scene, and hopefully give them a bit of pedigree and a bit of a chance to be more competitive.
Nice. Other news was actually a signing from south down under to up north. Northampton Saints have managed to poach Wallaby lock Salakai Loto. He's kind of a lock and a back row kind of hybrid thing. 6'6", big unit, but he has 30 Test caps, and he's going to arrive at Franklin's Gardens at the conclusion of the 2022 Super Rugby campaign.
30 caps that he has
might entitle him to the selection.
Wallaby selection.
Well, they're all up in the air about that Wallaby selection thing anyway, given that Northern Tour. The precedent's kind of out the window.
Apart from the out of sight, out of mind thing. Like, he's going there a year out from the World Cup out to...
to be honest, he was struggling in my reckoning to be the first choice. Like, certainly I don't have him in over Phillip or
Darcy Swain.
Or Darcy Swain, and then you're adding the Skelton to the mix that maybe this throws out. So... maybe a very good acquisition for Northampton if they need a guy, because he might be available for these kind of windows when
the World Cup window as well is obviously going to be a big one for the club sides for different reasons than the World Cup. Then also we have just some news from the SLAR, from the Superliga Americana de Rugby in South America, just that Colombia Rugby has decided to partner with Argentinian Rugby in terms of financing the Cafeteras Pro side. It was just a Colombian side, but Argentina are basically going to step in and help them out financially.
Argentina are doing their right role, and Colombia are right to reach out as well. Is that Argentina are going to have to float that competition and get it off the ground, because it's already had a season or two in the books, but it's going to take more, and it's going to take some of the Argentinian talent pool being disseminated around, a bit of a draft system. It's all kind of they're working with what they got, and they're trying to make it work on the fly, and this is just something that I think is a good precedent to set. Like, if you're in trouble, reach out to Argentina, they'll try and help you out.
Yeah, exactly. So the UAR are in part financing them this year, and so the Colombian side will travel to Chile, which will be hosting the opening game between the Cafeteras Pro and the Jaguares in Valparaiso. That's going to be in March 13th, so the week after this the Superliga restarts. So looking forward to that one, entering back into the club footy mix. Then we also had news from Saracens, where good news that Mark McCall, who we mentioned a few weeks back, or a few months back perhaps now, was taking a break for personal reasons. He's returned to the Sarries camp. He says he's fresh, feels ready to rock. And in his absence, they've gone 2-2 in 4 games, Saracens, and he's hoping to
mixed bag, hoping to improve on that. They're still second in the league and looking absolutely grand for a playoff spot. So it's not there's no reason. They got
Leicester this week, and now McCall's back in the mix. Maybe he's been doing his homework quietly,
coming in with an anti-Leicester plan. Perhaps I wouldn't put it past him. He's a stellar coach, as Mark McCall, and it's good to see him back. And certainly Sarries fans will be delighted to see him return. And then other news from the Premiership. The last bit of news was that Gloucester Rugby today announced that Charlie Sharples has retired from the professional rugby with immediate effect. Charlie's been just an amazing winger for Gloucester for many years. I think 15 years total as a servant. He'll definitely go down as a great of the cherry and whites. He was a dangerous player.
Probably an underrated player.
Definitely.
Probably worthy of I'm sure he was capped by England, but he probably worthy of more caps than he got.
He was that Christian Wade kind of ether of not really being looked at when there was
a fabulous offensive player. And when Cipriani was doing his thing at their peak, Sharples was playing off him so well. His counter-attacking game was brilliant.
His try-scoring record was stellar in those few seasons with Cipriani in particular.
Anyone who plays 15 years years as with one
In the
club
back three.
is going to go down as a club legend and a club great. But Charlie Sharples was actually cut above. Like, he was awesome, he was effective, he was also just joyous to watch. So thank you, Charlie. Thank you for giving me much joy watching rugby. You were awesome.
I always
And,
enjoyed
best of
watching
luck.
Gloucester play, and best of luck in the post-playing career to Charlie Sharples.
Absolutely. But that does about wrap us up for this show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Obviously, just the reviews there this week, but we will be back next week with some major previews of some Six Nations games, of some Rugby Europe games, talking about all the big footy coming up in Test Rugby. So be sure to tune in for that one. But as it is, I think we're going to wrap it up and see you guys next week. Absolutely. So listen, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.